The champagne flute shattered against marble before anyone heard the gunshot. Marcus Cole's hand was already moving, grabbing Evelyn Hart by her shoulders. Throwing her behind the mahogany bars, three men in tailored suits pulled weapons in the center of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant. The billionaire CEO hit the floor hard, gasping, while her quiet server became something else entirely. 4 seconds. That's all it took for Marcus to dismantle three professional killers with his bare hands. Moving like violence was a language he'd been born speaking. By the time the screaming started, it was already over. But as Marcus helped the shaking woman to her feet, his calloused hands gentle despite what they'd just done, neither of them knew this was only the beginning. Someone wanted Evelyn Hart dead, and the single father who'd been serving her dinner had just painted a target on both their backs. If you want to see how a man who walked away from war gets pulled back into the darkness to protect the one person who makes him want to stay in the light, then you need to hear this story to the very end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now let's get into it. The thing about violence is that it has a smell. Most people never learn to recognize it. That particular chemical sharpness of adrenaline mixed with gun oil and the metallic tang of intent. Marcus Cole had been surrounded by that smell for the better part of a decade, back when he wore a different uniform and answered to a different name. Now, standing in the pristine kitchen of Luminaire, Manhattan's newest temple to excess and exclusivity, he was supposed to be beyond all that. He was supposed to be normal. The kitchen hummed with controlled chaos. Chefs barking orders in French-accented English, sous chefs moving in practiced choreography, servers gliding through the swinging doors with plates that cost more than Marcus made in a week. He stood at the expediting station, arranging microgreens on a $30 appetizer with the same precision he'd once used to field strip an assault rifle. Table 7 needs their second course, Antoine, the floor manager said without looking up from his tablet. The Hart Party. Marcus nodded, lifting the tray with steady hands. Table 7. The corner booth with the privacy screens and the view of the city lights spreading like a circuit board across the darkness. He'd served that table 3 times in the past month, always the same woman, always alone despite the table being set for 4. Evelyn Hart. Everyone knew who she was. 34 years old and already the CEO of Hart Industries, the youngest woman to ever crack the Fortune 500 on her own merit rather than inheritance. The business magazines called her ruthless. The tabloids called her ice. Marcus called her ma'am and tried not to notice the particular shade of loneliness that seemed to follow her like expensive perfume. He pushed through the dining room doors into the cathedral hush of Luminaire's main floor. Crystal chandeliers cast everything in warm amber. Conversations murmured like water over stones. The piano player in the corner worked through something classical and melancholic. Normal. Everything was supposed to be normal. But Marcus's instincts, the ones he'd spent 2 years trying to bury under routine and single fatherhood, were screaming. The 3 men at table 12. He'd noticed them when they arrived 20 minutes ago. Dark suits, expensive but not custom. Faces that looked past the servers rather than at them. Hands that moved with a particular economy of motion. They'd ordered appetizers they weren't eating, wine they weren't drinking. Their attention kept drifting to the corner booth, to Evelyn Hart. Marcus set the tray on his shoulder and moved through the dining room like he'd been trained to move through hostile territory, aware of every exit, every sight line, every potential weapon within reach. The butter knife at table 5, the wine bottle at table 9, the distance to the kitchen doors. The distance to Evelyn. She was reading something on her tablet when he approached, her dark hair pulled back in a style that was elegant without trying, her navy dress understated enough to cost a fortune. She looked up as he set down her second course, seared scallops with some sauce that had 7 ingredients Marcus couldn't pronounce. "Thank you," she said, and her voice carried the particular weariness of someone who'd spent the day crushing opponents and felt no joy in the victory. "You're welcome, ma'am. Can I get you anything else?" "No, I'm—" The crash of breaking glass cut through the dining room's expensive tranquility. Table 12. Marcus turned in time to see one of the men sweep his wine glass to the floor. Deliberate, staged. The kind of distraction someone creates when they want all eyes in one direction while something else happens somewhere else. The second man was already standing, his hand inside his jacket. The third was moving toward Evelyn's table. Marcus's body responded before his conscious mind caught up. 10 years of training, thousands of hours of muscle memory, all of it flooding back like he'd never stopped being Sergeant Marcus Cole, Special Operations, the man who'd been pulled out of retirement 3 times because some situations required a particular kind of problem solver. He dropped the serving tray. The sound of silver hitting marble was its own kind of alarm. "Get down!" Marcus's voice cut through the room with command authority, and Evelyn Hart, whatever else she was smart, didn't hesitate. She dropped below the table as Marcus covered the distance to her booth in 3 strides. The first gunshot came from table 12, not aimed at Evelyn, aimed at Marcus. The bullet passed close enough that he felt the displacement of air, close enough that his old instinct screamed recognition. Professional shooter, compensating for center mass, going for the headshot. Marcus grabbed the edge of Evelyn's table and flipped it. 400 pounds of mahogany and marble tilted like it weighed nothing, providing cover as 2 more shots cracked through the air. Screaming erupted across the dining room. People dove under tables, scrambled for exits, chaos spreading like spilled wine. "Stay down," Marcus said to Evelyn, who was pressed against the floor, her eyes wide but focused. Not panicking, taking in information, processing, adapting. Good. Marcus moved. The first shooter was tracking him, weapon raised, professional stance. Marcus grabbed a wine bottle from the fallen table, 1998 Bordeaux, probably worth $2,000, and threw it with the same accuracy he'd once thrown grenades. It caught the shooter in the face, snapping his head back, giving Marcus the 2 seconds he needed to close the distance. The disarm was muscle memory. Trap the weapon hand, strike the elbow, rotate the wrist until bones ground against each other, and fingers opened reflexively. The gun clattered to the floor. Marcus drove his palm into the man's solar plexus, crushing the air from his lungs, then swept his legs and guided his fall so his head met the marble floor with exactly enough force to guarantee unconsciousness without permanent damage. 4 seconds. The second shooter was already pivoting, trying to acquire Marcus in his sights, but Marcus was inside his reach, too close for the weapon to matter. He struck the man's throat, controlled, precise, enough to disrupt breathing and speech without crushing the windpipe, then drove his knee into the liver. The shooter folded and Marcus caught the gun before it could discharge into the fleeing crowd. 7 seconds. The third man had abandoned subtlety. He was running straight for Evelyn's overturned table, a knife in his hand, his face showing the kind of determination that comes from orders you can't refuse and consequences you can't escape. Marcus raised the captured pistol. "Federal agent! On the ground, now!" He wasn't a federal agent, hadn't been for 6 years, but the voice, the weapon, the authority. It was enough to make the third man hesitate, to make his professional training fight against his orders. That hesitation was everything. Marcus crossed the distance between them, batting the knife away with the pistol, then driving his elbow into the man's temple. The impact was calculated, hard enough to scramble thoughts, soft enough to avoid a fractured skull. The man went down. 11 seconds. Marcus stood in the center of Luminaire's dining room, 3 unconscious men at his feet, a pistol in his hand, and the familiar weight of adrenaline beginning to ebb from his system. The screaming had stopped. The room had gone silent, except for the piano music still playing in the corner. The pianist had ducked behind his instrument, but his autonomous performance system was still running. Sirens approached in the distance. Marcus set the gun carefully on the floor, stepped away from it, raised his hands, standard procedure. When the police arrived to an active scene, you became whatever prevented them from shooting first and asking questions later. "Everyone stay calm," he said, his voice level, authoritative. "The threat is contained. Emergency services are en route. If anyone is injured, identify yourself now." Silence. Then, from beneath the overturned table, a voice. "You can put your hands down. I think you've earned the benefit of the doubt." Evelyn Hart crawled out from behind her cover, her dress torn at the knee, her hair disheveled, but her eyes sharp and assessing. She looked at the 3 unconscious men, then at Marcus, then back at the men. "Who are you?" she asked, not afraid, curious. "Nobody," Marcus said. "I'm nobody, ma'am, just a server who used to be someone else." "That's not how nobody moves." The sirens were getting louder. Marcus lowered his hands slowly. "We should wait for the police. You'll need to give a statement." "They were here for me." It wasn't a question. Yes, ma'am. You saved my life. I did my job. She studied him like he was a quarterly report she was trying to reconcile. What's your name? Your real name? Marcus Cole. Well, Marcus Cole. She straightened, brushed marble dust from her dress, and Marcus saw the exact moment she made whatever decision was forming behind her eyes. I'm going to need to know who you used to be, because whoever sent these men will send more. He wanted to tell her she was wrong, wanted to believe that violence was something he could leave in the past like an old uniform folded in a box in his closet. But Marcus Cole had spent enough time in the dark to recognize its patterns. This wasn't over. This was just the opening move. The NYPD detective's name was Sarah Chen, and she had the particular exhaustion of someone who'd been working homicide long enough to stop being surprised by human cruelty, but not quite long enough to stop caring about it. So let me make sure I understand this correctly, she said, reviewing her notes for the third time. You're a server. You saw 3 men acting suspicious. You somehow identified them as armed, despite them wearing suits that would hide weapons. And then, when they opened fire, you, a server, managed to disarm and incapacitate 3 professional contractors in under 15 seconds. Marcus sat in Luminaire's office, his hands folded on the table, his voice steady. That's correct, Detective. You're former military. Yes, ma'am. Army. Honorable discharge 6 years ago. What did you do in the Army? Infantry. Standard deployment rotation. Detective Chen looked at him the way she probably looked at suspects who gave technically true answers that avoided the actual truth. Infantry soldiers don't move like you moved. I've seen the security footage. I had good training. Mr. Cole, am I being detained, Detective? She sighed. No, you're a witness and potentially a victim. Those men fired at you first, which suggests they either identified you as a threat or you were a secondary target. Either way, you responded with what appears to be legitimate self-defense and defense of others. But I need you to understand something. She leaned forward. These weren't amateurs. We ran their prints. One has ties to a private military contractor. Another did 8 years for aggravated assault in a contract killing case that fell apart on technicalities. The third is still unidentified, which means he's either very clean or very connected. Marcus said nothing. Someone sent professionals to assassinate Evelyn Hart in a public place. That takes resources, planning, and a level of disregard for consequences that worries me. Which means Ms. Hart is still in danger. Which means you might be in danger now too because you're the reason their first attempt failed. I understand. Do you? Because the NYPD can provide protection, but we're stretched thin, and private security for someone like Ms. Hart usually comes from firms that cost more per day than I make in a month. I can't protect you both. I'm not asking you to protect me, Detective. I can take care of myself. Clearly, she closed her notebook. But here's what I need from you. If you remember anything else, any detail about those men, anything they said, any indication of who sent them, you contact me immediately. And if you're planning to do something extraordinarily stupid like hunt down whoever ordered this hit, please reconsider. This is a police matter now. Marcus stood. Marcus, I'm not planning anything, Detective. I just want to go home to my daughter. That softened her expression slightly. You have a kid? 8 years old. She's with a neighbor right now, probably wondering why I'm late for bedtime stories. Detective Chen handed him her card. Then go be her father, Mr. Cole. Leave the dangerous men to people who get paid to deal with dangerous men. Yes, ma'am. He was halfway to the door when she spoke again. Mr. Cole? That thing you did in there. Disarming 3 armed men without anyone else getting hurt, without killing anyone despite having multiple opportunities? That was remarkable. Whatever you were before you were a server, you were very good at it. Marcus looked back at her. Being good at violence doesn't make you good, Detective. Sometimes it just makes you useful. He left before she could respond. Evelyn Hart was waiting in the restaurant's private dining room, her security detail. 3 men in dark suits who looked competent but not extraordinary, standing at discreet distances. She changed into clothes someone had brought her, simple slacks and a blouse that probably cost more than Marcus's monthly rent. She stood when he entered. Mr. Cole? Thank you for staying to give your statement. It was necessary. The police told me you refused any medical attention. I'm not injured. You took on 3 armed men. They weren't very good. The corner of her mouth twitched, almost a smile. My head of security would disagree. He's been reviewing the footage for the past hour. He says those men moved like professionals. Then your head of security knows what professionals look like when they're working on a timeline with incomplete intelligence. They were good enough for a standard contract. They weren't good enough for someone who actually understands how violence works. She studied him the way she'd studied him in the dining room, like he was a problem she needed to solve. Walk with me. It wasn't a request. Her security detail formed a loose perimeter as they moved through Luminaire's back corridors toward the private elevator that led to the executive parking level. Marcus stayed close enough to be responsive, far enough to maintain respect for personal space. Do you know who I am, Mr. Cole? Evelyn asked. Yes, ma'am. You're the CEO of Hart Industries, youngest self-made billionaire in the country. You took over your father's failing manufacturing company and turned it into a diversified technology conglomerate in less than a decade. Someone's read the business section. My daughter likes me to read to her while she eats breakfast. I read whatever's available. That almost smile again. You have a daughter? Yes, ma'am. What's her name? Naya. She's 8. Just the 2 of you? Yes, ma'am. Her mother passed away 3 years ago. Evelyn's expression shifted. Not pity, but recognition. The understanding of someone who knew what loss weighed. I'm sorry. Thank you. They reached the elevator. Her security detail moved to follow, but Evelyn held up a hand. Give us a moment. The head of security, a broad man with a scar along his jaw and eyes that assessed Marcus as a potential threat, hesitated. Ma'am, protocol. Protocol failed tonight, Michael. I think Mr. Cole has demonstrated he's capable of keeping me safe for the duration of an elevator ride. Michael's jaw tightened, but he stepped back. We'll be waiting at the car level. The elevator doors closed, leaving Marcus and Evelyn alone in a space lined with mirrors and indirect lighting. She pressed the button for the parking level but didn't speak immediately. Marcus waited. He'd learned patience in the military, refined it in fatherhood. Some silences were better left alone. They weren't random, Evelyn finally said. Those men, they were sent specifically to kill me. Yes, ma'am. The detective asked me if I had any enemies. I laughed. Do you know how many enemies a person makes when they build a billion-dollar company from the ground up? When you're a woman doing it in an industry that still thinks of you as a novelty? I've crushed competitors, fired executives, dismantled companies, and absorbed their assets. I've made decisions that put thousands of people out of work because the numbers said it was necessary. That's business. That's what I tell myself. But tonight, 3 men tried to kill me because someone decided I'd become too expensive to leave alive. And the thing is, Mr. Cole, I don't know which enemy sent them. It could be the CEO I replaced in that hostile takeover last year. Could be the investor I exposed for fraud. Could be any of a dozen people who smile at me in board meetings and fantasize about my funeral. The elevator descended smoothly. You're telling me this because you want me to understand that there will be another attempt, Marcus said. I'm telling you this because I need to know if the man who saved my life tonight did it out of instinct or intention. Are you someone I can rely on, or am I just the customer you happened to be serving when violence came through the door? Marcus met her eyes in the mirror. I don't know yet. That's honest. You asked for truth, not comfort. Most people give me comfort disguised as truth. I'm not most people. No, she said quietly. You're certainly not. The elevator opened onto the parking level. Her security detail was waiting beside a black SUV with windows tinted past legal limits. Michael stepped forward, his hand hovering near his jacket in a way that suggested he was armed and ready. Evelyn turned to Marcus before exiting. I'm going to have my people look into you. That's not a threat. It's practicality. I need to know who you are, what you can do, and whether I can trust you. In return, I'm going to tell you something that's not public knowledge yet. Ma'am, this wasn't the first attempt. Last month, someone tampered with the brakes on my car. 2 weeks ago, someone sent a package to my office that security intercepted. It contained enough C4 to level the entire floor. Someone is trying very hard to kill me, and they're getting more aggressive. My security detail is competent, but tonight proved they're not enough. The police can investigate, but they're reactive. not protective. I need someone who understands violence the way you clearly understand violence. Marcus felt the old familiar weight settling onto his shoulders. The weight of responsibility, of capabilities that came with costs, of being the person others turned to when civilization's thin veneer cracked and showed the darkness underneath. I have a daughter, he said. She's already lost one parent. I can't. I'll pay you 5 times what you're making now. Flexible schedule, full benefits, education fund for your daughter. And when this is over, when whoever's trying to kill me is in prison or dead, you can walk away. No obligations, no strings. I'm not asking you to die for me, Mr. Cole. I'm asking you to help me stay alive long enough to find out who wants me dead and make sure they can't hurt anyone else. You're a father. You understand protecting people. That's all this is. The SUV's engine was running. Her security detail was getting impatient. Marcus thought about Naya, waiting for him in their small apartment, probably fighting sleep because she wanted to make sure her dad came home. Thought about the college fund he was barely managing to contribute to each month. Thought about the weight of his past and the life he'd built trying to leave it behind. I need to think about it, he said. Evelyn reached into her bag and produced a business card. Not her business card. This one had just a phone number, no name, no title. This is my private line. Call me before noon tomorrow. After that, I'll assume you've decided to stay a server, and I'll find someone else. She stepped into the SUV. Michael gave Marcus one last assessing look before closing her door and taking his position in the front passenger seat. Marcus watched the vehicle drive away, the card heavy in his hand. He took the subway home, changing trains twice out of habit, watching for tails that probably weren't there. His apartment was in Brooklyn, a neighborhood that was gentrifying faster than he could afford, in a building that had good locks and fire escapes he'd personally tested. Mrs. Chen from 4B was waiting in his living room when he unlocked his door, knitting something purple and amorphous while the TV played a Korean drama with subtitles. She fought bedtime for 2 hours, Mrs. Chen said without looking up. Finally went down around 9. She wanted to wait up for you. I'm sorry I'm late. There was an incident at work. The news says there was a shooting at Luminaire, says 3 men tried to kill that billionaire woman, says someone stopped them. Now she did look up, her eyes sharp despite her 70-something years. You're a server, Marcus. Servers don't stop assassins. I used to be someone else. We're all someone else before we're who we are now. She gathered her knitting. The question is whether the someone else is past tense or just sleeping. She left before he could respond. Marcus locked the door behind her, 3 locks, 1 deadbolt, 1 chain, and moved through his apartment in the dark. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that was really just a hallway with appliances, furniture from thrift stores and sidewalk finds that Nia had helped him sand and paint, photographs on the wall, most of them featuring a little girl with her mother's smile and her father's eyes. He pushed open Nia's bedroom door carefully. She was sprawled across her bed, blankets kicked off despite the winter cold, one arm hanging off the edge, the other clutching a stuffed elephant that had been his wife's childhood companion. Her nightlight, a galaxy projector that threw stars across the ceiling, painted her face in soft blues and purples. Marcus sat on the edge of her bed, careful not to wake her, watched her breathe, thought about all the ways the world could hurt a little girl who'd already lost too much. I don't know what to do, he whispered to the dark. Nia stirred, her eyes opening halfway. Daddy? Hey, baby, I didn't mean to wake you. You're late. I know, I'm sorry. She rubbed her eyes, trying to focus. Mrs. Chen said there was bad stuff on the news. About your restaurant. It's okay. Everyone's safe. Were you scared? Marcus thought about the 3 men, the guns, the moment when training took over and Sergeant Marcus Cole emerged from where he'd been sleeping. No, baby. I wasn't scared. Mommy used to say you weren't scared of anything. She said you were the bravest person she ever met. The grief was older now, less sharp, but still present, like scar tissue that ached in cold weather. Your mommy was braver than me. Being brave isn't about not being scared. It's about being scared and doing what needs to be done anyway. Naya yawned. Are you going to do something brave, Daddy? I don't know yet. Mrs. Chen says when you don't know what to do, you should do what's right, even if it's hard. Mrs. Chen is very wise. She also says you should eat more vegetables. Marcus smiled despite everything. I'll work on that. He tucked her back in, pulled the blankets up to her chin, kissed her forehead. She was asleep again before he reached the door. In his own bedroom, Marcus changed out of his work clothes and sat on the edge of his bed. The business card was still in his pocket. He pulled it out, studied the numbers in the light from the street. 5 times his current salary. Education fund for Nia. The chance to do what he was good at, what he'd been trained for, what some part of him missed even as another part of him was terrified of becoming that person again. But it wasn't really about the money. Evelyn Hart was in danger. Real, immediate, professional danger. And Marcus had seen enough death to know what happened when good people relied on inadequate protection. The security detail she had was competent, but competent wasn't enough when someone wanted you dead badly enough to send professionals. He thought about his wife's last words to him, whispered from a hospital bed when they both knew she wouldn't see another sunrise. Take care of our girl, and take care of yourself. You don't have to save the world anymore, Marcus. You just have to be here. He'd promised her. He'd meant it. But tonight, when violence came through the door, he hadn't hesitated. Hadn't thought about Naya or promises or the life he'd built. He'd just moved, because that's what his body knew how to do, what his training had made instinctive. Maybe Mrs. Chen was right. Maybe the someone else wasn't past tense. Maybe he was just sleeping. Marcus lay back on his bed, staring at the ceiling, the business card still in his hand. Somewhere in Manhattan, Evelyn Hart was probably awake too, surrounded by security that hadn't been enough, trying to figure out which of her many enemies wanted her dead, badly enough to keep trying until they succeeded. He had until noon to decide. To choose between the life he'd built and the man he used to be. To choose between safety and the particular kind of purpose that only came from standing between violence and the people who couldn't protect themselves. Marcus closed his eyes, but he didn't sleep. He already knew what he was going to choose. He'd known from the moment those men had drawn their weapons. Some things you could walk away from. Some things walked with you. And violence, Marcus had learned, was patient. It would wait as long as it took for you to remember that you'd never really left it behind. You'd just learned to pretend. Marcus called the number at 11:47 the next morning, 13 minutes before Evelyn Hart's deadline. Nia was at school, her backpack stuffed with the lunch he'd packed and the math homework they'd reviewed together over breakfast. Mrs. Chen had promised to pick her up if he ran late, asking no questions but giving him a look that suggested she already knew the answers. The phone rang twice before Evelyn answered. "Mr. Cole." "I'll do it," Marcus said, "but I have conditions." "I'm listening." "My daughter comes first, always. If there's a conflict between your safety and her school play, her doctor's appointment, her needing me because she had a nightmare, she wins. Every time." "Agreed. I'm not your employee. I'm a contractor, which means I make my own decisions about tactics, security protocols, and threat response. You can overrule me, but if you do, I walk." "That's reasonable. And when this is over, when we find whoever's trying to kill you and neutralize the threat, I'm done. No request to stay on, no offers of permanent positions. I go back to my life." There was a pause. When Evelyn spoke again, her voice carried something that might have been understanding or might have been loneliness. "You really don't want this." "No, ma'am, I don't. But I'm good at it, and you need someone who's good at it. That's enough." "When can you start?" "Now. But first I need to see your security setup, your daily routine, your known threat assessments, and complete files on anyone who might want you dead." "I'll have my car pick you up. Where are you?" Marcus gave her the address of a coffee shop 3 blocks from his apartment. Old habits. Never let anyone know exactly where you lived until you were certain they weren't a threat. 30 minutes, Evelyn said. "I'll be ready." He hung up and stared at his phone for a long moment, watching his reflection in the dark screen. The man looking back at him had the same face he'd been seeing in the mirror for 6 years, but something had shifted behind the eyes. Something that recognized itself again. The black SUV arrived exactly 30 minutes later, Michael at the wheel. Another security guard Marcus didn't recognize in the passenger seat. He climbed into the back where Evelyn waited, dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than his monthly rent, her tablet already open to what looked like security reports. "Thank you for coming," she said as the SUV pulled into traffic. "Thank you for the opportunity to keep you alive." Is that how you think of it? An opportunity? It's how I think of everything I do, ma'am. My daughter is an opportunity to be a better man than I was. This job is an opportunity to make sure she doesn't lose another parent. Framing matters. Evelyn studied him with those sharp eyes that had probably terrified boardrooms full of executives. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone harder, more aggressive. Violence doesn't require aggression, ma'am. The best operators I ever worked with were the quiet ones. The ones who understood that killing is a technical problem, not an emotional release. Aggression gets you killed. Precision keeps you alive. You're talking about war. I'm talking about survival in situations where civilization's rules don't apply. War is just one context. There are others. The SUV navigated through Manhattan's morning traffic with the confidence of a vehicle whose driver had done this route 1,000 times. Marcus watched the streets, cataloging sight lines, identifying potential ambush points, noting patterns in the flow of pedestrians and vehicles. His mind was doing what it had been trained to do, turning the city into a tactical environment. The detective called me this morning, Evelyn said. She wanted to know more about you. I told her you were former military, honorably discharged, currently employed as a server. She seemed skeptical. Detective Chen is good at her job. She knows there's more to the story. Is there? Yes, ma'am. Are you going to tell me what it is? Marcus considered the question. Trust had to start somewhere, and if he was going to protect this woman, she needed to understand what kind of weapon she'd just hired. I was special operations, he said. Multiple deployments, classified operations, the kind of work that doesn't show up in public records. I was very good at what I did. Too good, maybe. They kept pulling me back for one more mission, one more problem that needed a particular kind of solution. When my wife got sick, I requested discharge. They granted it because I'd earned it, but also because I was starting to become a liability. How does someone like you become a liability? By caring more about getting home to your family than completing the mission. By hesitating when you used to act on instinct. By starting to question orders instead of following them. Combat effectiveness requires a certain kind of detachment. I lost mine. But last night was different. Last night was defense, not offense. I wasn't following orders or completing objectives. I was protecting someone who needed protecting. That's not detachment. That's the opposite. The SUV turned onto a street Marcus recognized, Upper East Side, old money, the kind of neighborhood where buildings had doormen who remembered your name and security systems that cost more than cars. They pulled into an underground parking garage beneath a building that rose 40 stories into the Manhattan skyline. The security here was visible and professional, cameras covering every angle, guards at checkpoints, biometric scanners on the elevator. This is home, Evelyn said. The top 3 floors. My security team operates from the 38th floor. I live on 40. Who else has access? Cleared personnel only, my security detail, housekeeping staff who've been with me for years, my personal assistant. Everyone goes through background checks and regular revetting. Background checks don't catch everything, especially not people who are motivated by the right price or the right pressure. They took a private elevator that required both a key card and a fingerprint scan. Michael stood at attention, his hand never far from his weapon, his eyes watching Marcus with the wariness of someone who'd sized up a potential threat and wasn't sure which category he fell into. The 38th floor was set up like a professional security operations center. Multiple monitors showing camera feeds from throughout the building and surrounding streets. A weapons locker that probably violated several city ordinances. A conference table covered in threat assessments and tactical maps. 3 people were waiting, 2 men and a woman, all carrying themselves with the particular posture that suggested military or law enforcement backgrounds. Mr. Cole, this is my security team, Evelyn said. You've met Michael. This is James, Sarah, and David. Marcus nodded to each of them. They nodded back with the careful neutrality of professionals who weren't sure if he was reinforcement or competition. I've asked Michael to brief you on our current protocols and known threats, Evelyn continued. I have meetings until 3. We can discuss your assessment after that. She left, and Marcus was alone with 4 people who protected someone for a living and probably resented the implication that they weren't enough. Michael gestured to the conference table. Have a seat. Marcus sat. The others arranged themselves around the table with the unconscious spacing of people who worked together regularly and understood each other's rhythms. "Before we start," Michael said, his voice carrying the gravel of someone who'd spent time shouting orders in difficult conditions, "I want to establish something. Ms. Hart hired you. I respect that. But I'm head of her security detail, which means ultimate responsibility for her safety falls to me. We can work together, or we can get in each other's way. Your choice." "I'm here to help," Marcus said, "not to take over." "Good. Because I watched the footage from last night about 20 times. You're fast, you're efficient, and you know what you're doing. But this isn't a combat zone. This is executive protection in an urban environment with legal constraints, public relations concerns, and a client who has a life that doesn't stop just because someone wants her dead." "Understood." "You sure? Because what you did last night, taking on 3 armed men in a public space, that was effective, but it was also reckless. People could have been hurt. The client could have been hurt in the crossfire. You made decisions without consulting the security team, without following any kind of protocol." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "You're right. I should have let them shoot her while I waited for protocol." James, one of the other guards, made a sound that might have been a suppressed laugh. Michael's jaw tightened. "You know what I mean." "I do. And you're not wrong. In an ideal situation, threat assessment happens before engagement, response is coordinated, backup is positioned appropriately. But last night wasn't an ideal situation. It was an active shooter scenario in a confined space with civilians present and seconds to make a decision. I made the one that kept your client alive. At considerable risk. Risk is relative. The risk of action versus the risk of inaction. I chose action. If you think that was wrong, we should establish that now, because it's how I'm going to keep operating." Sarah, the woman on the team, spoke up. She had the calm demeanor of someone who'd learned to project authority without volume. "The issue isn't your effectiveness, Mr. Cole. It's predictability. We need to know how you'll respond in various scenarios so we can coordinate. If you're a lone wolf, you're a liability, no matter how skilled you are." That was fair. Marcus nodded. "Tell me your protocols. I'll adapt where I can." They spent the next 2 hours going through security procedures, building access points, emergency exits, evacuation routes, safe rooms, communication protocols, threat response hierarchies. It was professional work, thorough and well-designed. Not perfect, but nothing ever was. The weaknesses became apparent as they talked. "You're too predictable," Marcus said when they'd finished the overview. "Ms. Hart's schedule is regular. Same morning routine, same office hours, same routes. Even with variable timing, pattern recognition will eventually give an attacker what they need." "She runs a company," Michael said. "She has obligations. Which is why we need to introduce controlled chaos. Vary her routes daily, use decoy vehicles, change her schedule randomly, make it impossible for anyone to predict where she'll be and when. That's going to interfere with her business operations. It's going to keep her alive, which is the priority." David, who'd been quiet until now, spoke with the accent of someone who'd grown up in Brooklyn and never left. "What about the attempts before last night? The car, the package? You think they're connected?" "Yes," Marcus said. "Escalation pattern. First attempt was subtle, brake tampering that could have looked like mechanical failure. Second was more direct but still deniable. Package could have come from anyone. Third was blatant, armed assault in a public place. Whoever's behind this is getting desperate or running out of time." "Running out of time for what?" Sarah asked. "That's what we need to figure out. What's Ms. Hart working on right now? Any major deals, acquisitions, investigations? Something that has a deadline?" Michael pulled up a file on one of the monitors. "She's in the middle of 3 active projects. 1. Hostile takeover of a tech company that's been hemorrhaging value. 2. Merger negotiations with a European manufacturing firm. 3. Testimony preparation for a congressional hearing on industry practices." Marcus studied the information. Who loses if she succeeds with any of these? The tech company's current executives definitely lose. They've been fighting the takeover for 6 months, getting more aggressive as their stock price drops. The European merger has opposition from nationalist factions on both sides who don't want cross-Atlantic consolidation. And the congressional hearing is about labor practices environmental compliance, and financial transparency. Plenty of companies would be happy if she didn't testify. So we have dozens of potential suspects. Hundreds if you count everyone who's been negatively affected by her business decisions over the years. Marcus leaned forward. Then we narrow it down. Who has the resources to hire professional contractors? Who has the connections to acquire commercial explosives? Who has the motivation to risk a public assassination attempt? NYPD is working that angle, Michael said. NYPD is working slow because they have to follow legal procedures. We don't. We're not vigilantes. No, we're private security, which means we can investigate, ask questions, and gather intelligence without warrants or Miranda rights. We find the threat, we document it, we hand it to the police, but we do it faster than they can. James grinned. I like him. Michael didn't. Ms. Hart hired you for protection, not investigation. Protection is reactive, investigation is proactive. You want to keep her safe? You need both. They stared at each other across the table, two professionals from different backgrounds trying to find common ground. Finally, Michael nodded. Fine, but you clear any investigative action with me first. And if you find something, it goes to the police through proper channels. We're not going to give Ms. Hart a legal liability along with a security upgrade. Agreed. The elevator chimed and Evelyn emerged, looking tired in a way that suggested her meetings had been particularly draining. She brightened slightly when she saw Marcus. Mr. Cole, I hope my team has been helpful. Very. We were just discussing proactive measures. Such as? Marcus stood. Such as the fact that you're going to hate the next few weeks of your life because everything you do is going to become unpredictable and inconvenient. But you're going to be alive to hate it. She smiled, a real smile this time, not the polite corporate version. Direct. I appreciate that. It's all I know how to be, ma'am. Please stop calling me ma'am. It makes me feel like I'm 80. Evelyn is fine. Evelyn, Marcus said, testing the name. It felt strange, too familiar, like crossing a line he'd been trained not to cross. But she'd asked. Good. Now, I have dinner with a potential investor at 7. Michael usually drives me, but I want you there too. Consider it a trial run. Where's the dinner? Novaro. Midtown. Private dining room. Marcus looked at Michael. You've secured the location? We have standard arrangements with most of the restaurants Ms. Hart frequents. Security sweep before she arrives, discreet presence during the meal, advanced team checks the route. Not anymore, Marcus said. From now on, we don't go anywhere that hasn't been personally swept by someone on this team within 2 hours of her arrival. No standard arrangements, no routine protocols. And I want 2 exit routes planned for every location, with vehicles staged at both. That's excessive, Michael said. That's why she's still alive to complain about it. Evelyn raised a hand before Michael could respond. Do it. Mr. Cole's methods may be inconvenient, but his results speak for themselves. She went to her private elevator, and Marcus watched her go, already cataloging vulnerabilities. The elevator itself could be trapped. The route from here to the car could be ambushed. The dinner location could be compromised. Every moment of her day was a potential attack vector. This was going to be exhausting. You're going to burn yourself out thinking like that, Sarah said, appearing at his shoulder. I can see it in your eyes. You're running through every possible threat scenario. It's what keeps people alive. It's also what gives people ulcers and heart attacks. Trust the team. We're good at this. I know you are, but good isn't always enough when someone wants you dead badly enough. She studied him with the kind of assessment that suggested she'd worked with people like him before. You've lost someone. Someone you were supposed to protect. Marcus didn't answer. It's in the way you move, the way you check sightlines. You're not just doing a job, you're trying to prevent something that already happened. My wife died in a hospital bed, Marcus said quietly, surrounded by machines and doctors and everything modern medicine could do. I was holding her hand. There was no enemy to fight, no threat to neutralize, just cells dividing wrong and time running out. So, no, I didn't fail to protect her, but I understand what loss feels like, and I understand that sometimes the only thing standing between someone and death is another person who refuses to let death win. Sarah nodded slowly. Okay, I get it now. You're not doing this for the money or the action. You're doing it because you need to believe that protection means something. Doesn't it? Yeah, she said. It does. But don't forget, you're protecting her, but you also have someone who needs you to come home. Keep that in perspective. At 3:15, Marcus called Mrs. Chen to check on Nia. She was fine, doing homework at the kitchen table, asking when Daddy would be home. Tell her I'll be there for dinner, Marcus said. And thank you for picking her up. You're doing something dangerous again, Mrs. Chen said. It wasn't a question. I'm doing something necessary. Your daughter needs you more than some rich woman needs a bodyguard. That rich woman is someone's daughter too, and she doesn't have anyone else who can do what I do, Mrs. Chen sighed. Your wife would be proud of you, and worried, same as me. Marcus hung up and went to prepare for the dinner service. He met with Michael to review the route, the security sweep results, the contingency plans. He studied photographs of the restaurant's layout, memorizing exits and sightlines and potential cover positions. At 6:30, he changed into the dark suit that Michael had provided, tailored, expensive, with reinforced panels that could stop a knife and enough room to conceal a weapon without printing. He checked the Glock 19 they'd issued him, verified the ammunition, tested the weight and balance. It felt familiar, too familiar. Evelyn emerged from her apartment at 6:45, dressed in an emerald dress that was elegant and professional without being ostentatious. She saw Marcus in the suit and raised an eyebrow. You clean up well. Thank you. You should know that I'm going to be close tonight, closer than you're probably comfortable with. If something happens, I need to be able to reach you in under 2 seconds. I understand. And if I tell you to do something, get down, move, run, you do it immediately without question. Hesitation gets people killed. You're very intense about this. This is the only way I know how to be about keeping people alive. They took the elevator down to the garage where 2 identical SUVs waited. Marcus had arranged this. One vehicle with Evelyn and himself, one decoy with Michael and James. Both would take different routes to the restaurant, making it harder to track which one contained the actual target. The drive through Manhattan's evening traffic was tense. Marcus sat beside Evelyn in the back, his attention divided between the windows, the side mirrors, and the driver's awareness of their surroundings. David was driving, competent and alert, but Marcus's instincts were screaming that this was wrong, that they were exposed, that someone could be watching. You're making me nervous, Evelyn said. Good. Nervous people pay attention. Is it always like this for you? This level of hypervigilance? It used to be. Then I spent 6 years learning to turn it off. Now I'm learning to turn it back on. Does it work? Turning it off? Marcus watched a delivery truck pass them, automatically noting the license plate, the driver's face, the way the vehicle sat on its suspension. Sometimes. When I'm with my daughter, I can usually manage it. She grounds me, reminds me that the world isn't all threats and violence. What's she like? The question surprised him. She's 8, smart, funny, entirely too good at knowing when I'm worried about something. She wants to be a marine biologist, spends half her allowance on books about ocean ecosystems. That's specific. Her mother took her to an aquarium when she was 5. She's been obsessed ever since. I don't understand half of what she talks about, but I love listening to her explain it. Evelyn smiled. You're a good father. I'm trying to be. Most days, that's the best I can manage. They arrived at Novaro without incident. The restaurant was upscale Italian, the kind of place where reservations required weeks of advance notice, and the wine list started at $300. Michael's advance team had swept the location. 2 guards posted discreetly at the entrance and exit, kitchen staff vetted, private dining room secured. Marcus walked Evelyn through the main dining room, noting the placement of other diners, identifying the staff, mapping the space in his mind. The private dining room was in the back, separated from the main floor by a hallway that created both privacy and vulnerability. I don't like this, Marcus said quietly. The investor insisted on this location. He's old-fashioned about these things. Old-fashioned or deliberately choosing a location with limited security? You think he's involved? I think everyone's involved until proven otherwise. The investor was waiting in the private dining room, a man in his 60s with silver hair and the kind of tan that suggested multiple homes in warm climates. He stood when Evelyn entered, extending a hand. Evelyn, always a pleasure. Robert, thank you for making time. Robert's eyes shifted to Marcus, assessing. New security? Recent addition, Evelyn said smoothly. Given recent events, I'm taking precautions. I heard about the incident at Luminaire. Terrible business. But I'm glad you're safe. They sat, and Marcus positioned himself near the door where he could watch both the room and the hallway. The investor seemed genuinely friendly, discussing market trends and potential collaboration opportunities. Nothing in his demeanor suggested threat. But Marcus's instincts were still screaming. The dinner progressed through multiple courses. Marcus declined food, declined wine, maintained his position and his awareness. Evelyn handled the business conversation with practiced ease, asking the right questions, making non-committal responses to proposals, projecting confidence and control. At 8:30, Marcus's phone buzzed. A text from Sarah, who was monitoring camera feeds from the security center. 3 men just entered the restaurant, no reservation, refused to wait for a table, kitchen entrance. Marcus moved. Evelyn, we're leaving, now. She looked up, saw his expression, and didn't argue. Robert started to protest, but Marcus was already guiding Evelyn toward the secondary exit he'd identified during the initial sweep. Through the kitchen, past the loading dock, to where David had positioned the SUV. They were halfway through the kitchen when the first gunshot echoed from the dining room. Screaming erupted. People ran in every direction. Marcus grabbed Evelyn, shielding her body with his, moving toward the exit with the controlled urgency of someone who'd done this before. The kitchen door burst open. 2 men, armed, professional, already tracking their target. Marcus pushed Evelyn behind a commercial refrigerator and engaged. The first man went down with a broken wrist and a concussion from being introduced to a stainless steel counter. The second was better, trained, aware, dangerous. They fought in the confined space of the kitchen, and Marcus felt the old patterns returning, the muscle memory that had been sleeping waking up fully. He won, but it cost him a cracked rib and a split lip. Go! He shouted to Evelyn, who was already moving toward the exit. They burst into the alley where David had the SUV running, doors open. Marcus practically threw Evelyn into the back seat and dove in after her as David floored it, tires screaming against pavement. Behind them, police sirens approached Navarro. Evelyn was breathing hard, her dress torn, her carefully maintained composure cracked. What just happened? Someone knew where you'd be, Marcus said, pressing his hand against his ribs and feeling the sharp pain that confirmed the crack. Which means either we have a leak or they're monitoring your communications. Or both. Or both. They switched vehicles twice during the drive back, using protocols Marcus had established that morning. By the time they reached Evelyn's building, it was nearly 10, and Marcus's body was reminding him that he wasn't 25 anymore. Evelyn's apartment was quiet and secure. The security team had already swept it twice. She went to pour herself a drink from a crystal decanter that probably cost more than Marcus's car. Her hands were shaking. This is my life now, she said, running from people who want me dead, wondering which of my colleagues or business associates is trying to kill me, having dinner interrupted by armed men. This is temporary, Marcus said. We'll find them. How can you know that? Because people who try this hard to kill someone always make mistakes. They're already making them, using the same contractors, escalating too quickly, getting sloppy. We'll find the pattern. She turned to face him. And when we do, what then? Then the police arrest them, and you go back to your life. Will I? Or will I spend the rest of my life waiting for the next attempt? Marcus didn't have an answer for that. Evelyn set down her glass and walked to the window that overlooked Manhattan's glittering sprawl. Do you know what the hardest part of building this company was? Not the long hours or the difficult decisions or the resistance from men who thought I didn't belong. It was accepting that success comes with a price, that every achievement creates enemies, that the higher you climb, the more people want to pull you down. You could step away, Marcus said quietly. Sell the company, retire, disappear. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. And let them win? Let whoever's doing this force me out of the life I built? No. I'd rather die standing than live running. That's pride talking. That's principle talking. There's a difference. Marcus moved to stand beside her at the window. From 40 stories up, the city looked peaceful, orderly, safe. An illusion created by distance. "You hired me to keep you alive," he said. "But staying alive isn't the same as living well. If this job costs you everything that makes your life worth living, then I'm failing even if you survive." "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we find a balance. We increase security without destroying your life. We investigate aggressively without becoming paranoid. We treat this as a problem to solve, not a war to win." Evelyn looked at him, really looked at him, and Marcus saw the exhaustion behind her eyes. The weight of responsibility, the burden of power, the loneliness of being at the top with nowhere to fall but down. "You're different from other security people I've worked with," she said. "How?" "They see me as a client, a job, a paycheck. You see me as a person. Everyone's a person. Some just forget that when the money gets big enough." His phone rang. Nia's ringtone, a snippet of her favorite song that she'd programmed herself. "I need to take this," Marcus said. "Of course." He walked to the other side of the apartment before answering. "Hey, baby." "Daddy, where are you?" Nia's voice was small, worried. "Mrs. Chen said you were working late, but it's really late, and I had a bad dream." Marcus felt his heart clench. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I'm still at work, but I'll be home soon, okay? Are you keeping someone safe?" "Yes." "Is it dangerous?" He thought about lying, decided she deserved better. "A little bit, but I'm being very careful." "Promise?" "Promise." "Okay. I love you, Daddy. I love you too, baby. So much." He hung up and stood there for a moment, caught between two worlds, the one where he protected a billionaire from professional killers, and the one where he was just a dad who'd promised his daughter he'd come home. Evelyn appeared in the doorway. "Your daughter?" "Yeah, she had a nightmare." "You should go to her." "My shift isn't over." "Marcus," the use of his first name startled him. "Go home. Be her father. Michael can handle tonight. We'll resume tomorrow." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure that if something happened to you because you were protecting me instead of being with her, I'd never forgive myself. Go." Marcus left, taking the service elevator down to avoid the main security checkpoints. The night air was cold against his face as he stepped onto the street. His ribs ached. His lip was still bleeding slightly. But he was alive, and his daughter needed him. He caught a cab to Brooklyn, watching the city pass by through the window. Somewhere out there, someone was planning another attempt on Evelyn Hart's life. Someone with resources, connections, and the determination to keep trying until they succeeded. Tomorrow, Marcus would start hunting them. Tonight, he was going to read his daughter a story and remind himself why he was doing this at all. Mrs. Chen let him in without comment, though her eyes lingered on his split lip. Nia was waiting in her bed, her galaxy nightlight painting the walls with stars. She sat up when she saw him. "You're hurt." "Just a little, nothing serious." "Did you keep someone safe?" "Yes." She seemed to accept that. "Can you stay until I fall asleep?" "I can stay as long as you need." He sat on the edge of her bed, and she curled against him, small and trusting and entirely too precious. He thought about Evelyn alone in her fortress apartment, surrounded by security but isolated by circumstance. Thought about the men who'd tried to kill her tonight, who'd failed because Marcus had been there. This was why he'd said yes. Not for the money or the action or the chance to use skills he'd thought he'd left behind, but because some people needed protecting, and Marcus had spent enough of his life learning how to protect them. Nia fell asleep against his shoulder. Marcus stayed for another hour, watching her breathe, grateful for this moment of peace in a day that had been anything but peaceful. Tomorrow would bring new threats, new challenges, new decisions about how far he was willing to go to keep Evelyn Hart alive. But tonight, he was exactly where he needed to be. Marcus woke at 5:30 to find Nia already awake, sitting at their small kitchen table with a book about coral reefs open in front of her and a bowl of cereal going soggy while she read. "Morning, baby," he said, his ribs reminding him of last night's fight with every breath. She looked up, her eyes going immediately to the bruise darkening along his jawline. "Does it hurt?" "Not too bad." "You're lying. Mommy always said you were terrible at lying." Marcus smiled despite the pain. "Your mommy was right about a lot of things." He made coffee while she finished her cereal, the domestic routine grounding him after the violence of the previous night. This was what mattered. This kitchen, this apartment, this child who was growing up too fast and seeing too much of a world that wasn't always kind. Mrs. Chen said you're working for a rich lady now, Nia said, turning a page without looking up. She said rich people have a lot of enemies. Mrs. Chen talks too much. She says you're doing something dangerous again, like before, when you were a soldier. Marcus sat down across from her. It's not like that. I'm just helping someone who needs help. But people are trying to hurt her, and now they're trying to hurt you. Nobody's going to hurt me, baby. I promise. Nia finally looked up from her book, and the expression on her face was far too old for 8 years. You can't promise that, Daddy. Nobody can promise that. Mommy couldn't promise she'd get better, and she didn't. You can't promise you won't get hurt. The truth of it landed like a physical blow. Marcus reached across the table and took her small hand in his. You're right. I can't promise I won't get hurt. But I can promise that I'm being very careful, and I'm very good at what I do, and I'm going to do everything possible to come home to you every single day. What if everything possible isn't enough? Then I'll do everything impossible too. She smiled a little at that. That doesn't make sense. No, it doesn't, but it's still true. He walked her to school, watching her disappear into the building with her backpack bouncing and her mind already returning to whatever fascinating fact about marine ecosystems she'd been reading about. Then he caught the subway to Manhattan, his body protesting the movement, but his mind already shifting into the tactical awareness that had become second nature again. His phone rang as he emerged from the subway. Evelyn. Michael tells me you got hurt last night. Michael should mind his own business. Your physical condition is my business when you're supposed to be protecting me. Do you need medical attention? It's a cracked rib. I've had worse. I'll tape it and keep moving. That sounds profoundly stupid. It's practical. I can't protect you from a hospital bed. There was a pause. I'm attending a board meeting at Hart Industries headquarters at 10. Michael wants to cancel. I'm overruling him. I need you there. That's a bad idea. After last night, whoever's targeting you knows we've improved security. They'll be looking for opportunities, and a board meeting means predictable location, predictable time, multiple access points. Which is why I need you there. The board is already nervous about the attacks. If I start canceling meetings, they'll lose confidence. Some are already suggesting I should step down temporarily until the threat is resolved. Maybe they're right. Maybe they're part of the problem. I need to see who's pushing hardest for me to disappear. Sometimes the only way to find a snake is to step into the grass and see what moves. Marcus understood the logic even as he hated the risk. You're using yourself as bait. I'm doing my job while you do yours. The meeting is at 10. I'll see you at 9:30. She hung up before he could argue further. The Hart Industries building was in Midtown, a glass and steel tower that reached 42 stories into the sky and housed 3,000 employees across multiple divisions. Marcus met Michael in the lobby at 9. Both of them moving through the security protocols that had been enhanced overnight. She's insisting on this meeting, Michael said, his voice tight with frustration. I've told her it's dangerous. She doesn't care. She cares. She just values control more than safety. It's what makes her good at what she does and terrible to protect. You think this is funny? I think it's familiar. I've protected plenty of high-value targets who thought they knew better than their security. Sometimes they were right. Usually, they were dead. Michael's expression darkened. We need to coordinate on this. The boardroom is on the 35th floor, northeast corner. Limited access points, but the windows are vulnerable. I'm posting Sarah and James at the elevator banks. David is monitoring camera feeds from the security center. That leaves you and me with Ms. Hart. Not enough. We need someone in the building across the street watching for sniper positions. We need the boardroom swept for devices. We need background checks on every board member and their assistants. We did background checks when they joined the board. Do them again. People change. Motivations change. Money changes people faster than anything. They took the express elevator to 35. Marcus's hand resting near the weapon concealed beneath his jacket. The boardroom was already prepared. A long table of polished mahogany, leather chairs, presentations queued on multiple screens. 15 board members would attend, plus assistants, plus Evelyn. Too many variables, too many potential threats. Marcus walked the perimeter, checking sight lines, testing the windows, examining the ventilation system. Everything looked clean, but clean didn't mean safe. Evelyn arrived at 9:40, dressed in a navy suit that projected authority and confidence. She barely glanced at Marcus, all business, all CEO, but he caught the slight tension in her shoulders, the way her eyes swept the room before she entered. She was afraid. She just refused to show it. The board members arrived in clusters, some together, some alone, all carrying tablets and briefcases, and the particular self-importance of people who controlled billions in assets. Marcus watched each one, cataloging faces, noting body language, looking for the tells that suggested guilt or conspiracy. Robert was there, the investor from last night's interrupted dinner. He nodded to Evelyn with apparent concern. "Terrible business at Novaro. I'm glad you're safe." "Thank you, Robert. I appreciate your understanding about cutting dinner short." Of course. Security must come first." Another board member, a woman named Patricia with silver hair and the sharp eyes of someone who'd built her fortune in hostile negotiations, took a seat near the head of the table. "Evelyn, perhaps we should discuss the current security situation before we address the agenda. The board is concerned." "Concerned about my safety or concerned about the company's exposure?" "Both. These attacks reflect poorly on Hart Industries. Investors are nervous, stock prices are volatile. Some are suggesting that perhaps a temporary transition of leadership might give whoever's trying to kill me exactly what they want." Evelyn's voice was steel wrapped in silk. "I won't be threatened into abandoning the company I built." No one's suggesting abandonment, just a strategic pause until the threat is neutralized. Marcus leaned against the wall near Evelyn's chair, close enough to intervene if necessary. He caught Michael's eye across the room. They were both thinking the same thing. This meeting was a mistake. The discussion turned to quarterly reports, merger negotiations, strategic initiatives. Marcus stopped listening to the words and started listening to the patterns. Who spoke with confidence? Who deferred? Who seemed nervous? Who kept checking their phones? Patricia was aggressive, pushing back on several of Evelyn's proposals. Robert was diplomatic, trying to find middle ground. A younger board member named Thomas seemed distracted, his attention wandering to the windows. The windows. Marcus moved closer to them, his instincts screaming. The building across the street had a clear line of sight into the boardroom. He'd requested surveillance there, but had Michael actually positioned someone? He pulled out his phone and texted Michael. "Who's watching the building across the street?" The response came back immediately. "David from Security Center, camera feeds only." Not enough. Marcus was crossing to Michael to insist on physical surveillance when the window shattered, not from a bullet, from a small drone that crashed through the glass in an explosion of fragments and composite materials. Marcus moved on pure instinct, grabbing Evelyn and throwing her to the floor as the drone detonated. The explosion was controlled, directional, designed to kill rather than destroy. Shrapnel tore through the space where Evelyn had been standing, shredding her chair, embedding in the wall behind her. Screaming erupted. Board members dove for cover. Michael was shouting into his radio, coordinating response. Marcus covered Evelyn's body with his own, feeling debris rain down on his back. His ribs screamed in protest, but he didn't move until the last of the shrapnel stopped falling. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice sharp. "I don't think so. I can't hear very well." Her ears were ringing from the blast. Marcus pulled her to her feet, checked her for injuries, found nothing worse than cuts from glass fragments. Around them, the boardroom was chaos. Patricia was bleeding from a head wound. Thomas was unconscious. Robert was on his phone, already calling for emergency services. "We need to evacuate," Michael said, appearing at Marcus's shoulder. "Now." "Secondary attack," Marcus said. "They used the drone to scatter us, create confusion. The real threat is waiting for us to move. We can't stay here. We can't run blind either." Marcus pulled Evelyn toward the interior wall, away from the shattered windows, positioning himself between her and any potential threat. His mind was racing through scenarios, calculating probabilities, trying to think like whoever had orchestrated this. Sophisticated attack, military-grade explosive, precision timing. This wasn't a hired contractor following orders. This was someone with serious resources and tactical expertise. "Michael, get me building schematics. All access points, all exit routes, and I need to know who had access to the building's roof in the last 48 hours. Why the roof? Because that's where I'd stage a follow-up attack. High ground, multiple escape routes, clear sightlines to all exits. Michael was already on his radio, coordinating with David in the security center. Emergency services sirens approached from multiple directions. The building's fire alarm started blaring, triggering automatic evacuation protocols. We can't use standard evacuation procedures, Marcus said. Too predictable. We need a route nobody expects. Evelyn's hearing was returning. She grabbed Marcus's arm. The executive elevator, private shaft, separate power system, exits directly to the garage sublevel. Can it be accessed remotely? No, biometric only, my fingerprint and retinal scan. Then that's our route. Marcus coordinated with Michael, establishing a protective formation. Sarah and James would lead, clearing the path to the executive elevator. Michael would flank left. Marcus would stay with Evelyn. David would coordinate from the security center and have vehicles ready in the garage. They moved through corridors, filling with evacuating employees. Marcus's awareness stretched to breaking point. Every person was a potential threat. Every open door was an ambush point. Every intersection was a kill zone. The executive elevator was 40 yards from the boardroom, through 2 corridors and past a reception area. Sarah reached it first, her weapon drawn, clearing the space with professional efficiency. Clear, she reported. Evelyn stepped forward to the biometric scanner. Her hand was shaking slightly as she pressed her palm against the reader, leaned forward for the retinal scan. The elevator door opened, empty. Marcus went in first, swept it, confirmed it was clean. Move. Evelyn stepped inside, followed by Marcus, then Michael. The doors were closing when Thomas, the board member who'd been unconscious, appeared at the end of the corridor, running toward them. Wait, please! Something in Marcus's gut twisted. Wrong. This was wrong. Don't, he started to say, but Michael was already hitting the door control, holding the elevator open. Thomas reached them, breathing hard, his face pale with shock and fear. He stepped inside and Marcus saw it. The slight bulge under Thomas's jacket, the way his right hand stayed rigid. The particular tension in his posture that suggested someone under extreme stress making an irreversible decision. Everybody out, Marcus said quietly. Now. What? Michael asked. Marcus moved faster than thought, grabbing Evelyn and throwing her out of the elevator, following her into the corridor. Michael's training kicked in. He didn't question, just moved, diving out after them. Thomas stood alone in the elevator, his hand moving to his jacket. I'm sorry, he said, and his voice carried the hollow emptiness of a man who'd already made peace with death. They have my daughter. They said if I didn't... Marcus hit the emergency close button. The doors sealed. 3 seconds later, the explosion ripped through the elevator shaft. The blast was contained by the reinforced elevator car and shaft, but the concussion wave was enough to throw everyone in the corridor to the ground. Marcus covered Evelyn again, his body absorbing the impact, his ribs definitely broken now, not just cracked. Alarms screamed, sprinkler systems activated. Emergency lighting kicked in as the main power failed. We need to move, Marcus gasped, pulling Evelyn to her feet. That explosion will bring response teams, but it also confirms we have inside help. We can't trust anyone. Thomas, Evelyn said, her voice hollow with shock. He was a good man. He had a daughter in college. They used her. And they'll use anyone else they can leverage. We need to get you somewhere secure, somewhere nobody knows about. The safe house, Michael said, blood running from a cut on his forehead. We have a location in Queens, completely off books, purchased through a shell company. Only the security team knows about it. How many people on the security team? 6. The 4 of us plus 2 others who rotate. Too many. Anyone could be compromised. So what do you suggest? We can't just wander the streets. Marcus thought fast. They needed a location that was secure, private, and completely disconnected from Evelyn's known resources. Somewhere nobody would think to look. My apartment, he said. Everyone stared at him. Your apartment? Evelyn repeated. It's registered under my name, no connection to you or Hard Industries. It's in a neighborhood nobody associates with billionaire CEOs. It's defensible. I know every inch of it. And the only person who could be used as leverage there is already the person I care most about protecting. You're suggesting I hide in Brooklyn? I'm suggesting you disappear into the one place nobody's watching because nobody thinks you'd go there. We buy ourselves time to investigate, to figure out who's compromised, to find who's behind this before they try again. Evelyn looked at Michael, who considered it and slowly nodded. It's not the worst idea. Off the grid, unexpected location, defensible position. But we need to get there without being followed. Leave that to me, Marcus said. They took the service stairs down to the garage sublevel, avoiding the chaos of the main evacuation. David had 3 vehicles waiting, engines running, drivers ready. Marcus chose the middle vehicle, a nondescript sedan that could blend into traffic, and directed the other 2 to take decoy routes. The drive to Brooklyn took 40 minutes through traffic that was snarled by emergency vehicles responding to the Hart Industries incident. Marcus spent the entire drive watching for tails, changing lanes randomly, taking unexpected turns, using every counter-surveillance technique he'd learned during his military service. By the time they pulled up to his apartment building, he was reasonably confident they were clean. Mrs. Chen was in the lobby, returning from her morning walk. She took one look at Marcus supporting a disheveled Evelyn, Michael trailing behind with his weapon barely concealed, and raised her eyebrows. The rich lady, I presume. Mrs. Chen, this is Evelyn Hart. She'll be staying with me for a few days. I'd appreciate your discretion. You're bringing danger to this building. I'm bringing someone who needs protection. There's a difference. Mrs. Chen studied Evelyn with the assessing gaze of someone who'd survived enough of life to recognize suffering when she saw it. You look like you've had a very bad day. That's an understatement, Evelyn said quietly. Come, I'll make tea. Whatever crisis you're having, it will wait long enough for tea. Before Marcus could protest, Mrs. Chen had ushered Evelyn toward her apartment. Michael looked at Marcus questioningly. She's harmless, Marcus said, and she's right about the tea. We could all use 10 minutes to regroup. Mrs. Chen's apartment was a mirror of Marcus's layout, but decorated with 40 years of accumulated memories. Photographs of children and grandchildren, furniture that had been reupholstered multiple times, the smell of cooking that never quite left. She sat Evelyn at the kitchen table and produced tea that was already somehow prepared, as if she'd known they were coming. You're the one people are trying to kill, Mrs. Chen said, not a question. Yes, Evelyn answered, and Marcus is protecting you. He's trying to. He's very good at protecting people. It's what he did in the war, but it cost him things. Pieces of himself he had to leave behind to do what needed doing. You should know that before you ask him to go too far. Evelyn looked at Marcus, who was standing by the door, alert despite his injuries. He's already gone far. Not as far as he can go. That's what worries me. The tea was strong and sweet, and exactly what they all needed. Michael used the time to coordinate with Sarah and James, establishing security protocols for the building. David was monitoring police communications from a remote location, tracking the investigation into the Hart Industries attack. After 10 minutes, Mrs. Chen shooed them out. Go. Do whatever dangerous things you need to do. But remember, Marcus has a daughter who comes home from school at 3 o'clock. Whatever this is, it doesn't change that. Marcus's apartment felt smaller with Evelyn and Michael inside it. Evelyn stood in the center of the living room, taking in the mismatched furniture, the photographs of Nia, the life Marcus had built from the pieces of who he'd been. This is where you live, she said, and there was something like wonder in her voice. This is home. It's so... She searched for words. Normal. That's kind of the point. Michael was already securing the space, checking windows, testing locks. Marcus went to his bedroom and retrieved the locked case from his closet. Inside was equipment he'd told himself he'd never use again. Tactical gear, additional weapons, surveillance equipment. He was strapping on a shoulder holster when Evelyn appeared in his doorway. How bad are your ribs? Bad enough that I should probably be in a hospital, not bad enough to stop me from doing what needs doing. You keep saying that. What needs doing? Marcus met her eyes. We need to find who's behind this. And we need to do it fast before they realize you're not dead and plan another attempt. Which means we can't wait for the police to work through proper channels and legal procedures. We need to investigate like people who don't have time for rules. That's dangerous. Everything about this situation is dangerous. At least this way we're controlling the danger instead of reacting to it. How do we start? We start by making a list of everyone who benefits from your death. Then we narrow it down to who has the resources to pull off coordinated attacks using military-grade equipment and inside information. Then we find proof and we hand it to the police before whoever it is tries again. Michael returned from his security check. Building is defensible. Old construction, good sightlines, limited access points. I've got Sarah positioned outside. James is monitoring from a vehicle 2 blocks away. We're as secure as we're going to get in an uncontrolled environment. Good. Now we need information. David, can you access Hart Industries' internal communications and financial records? Legally or effectively? Effectively. Give me 2 hours. Marcus pulled up a map on his laptop, marking the locations of each attack. Luminaire Restaurant, Hart Industries Building, Novaro Restaurant. He added Evelyn's home, her office, the attempted car tampering, the intercepted package. A pattern emerged. They're escalating, he said. Each attack is more brazen, more public, more desperate, which suggests either they're running out of time or you're getting close to something they can't let you discover. Evelyn was studying the timeline of her business activities. The congressional hearing. It's in 3 days. I'm scheduled to testify about industry labor practices, environmental compliance, and financial transparency. Who does that hurt? Dozens of companies. But specifically, it exposes a pattern of coordinated violations across the manufacturing sector. Price fixing, labor exploitation, environmental damage that's been systematically covered up. If my testimony goes forward, it triggers federal investigations that could result in billions in fines and criminal charges for executives. So we're not looking for someone with a personal grudge, Marcus said. We're looking for someone protecting an entire industry. Or multiple someones. A conspiracy. Michael's phone buzzed. He answered, listened, his face going pale. You're certain? Verified? He hung up and looked at Marcus and Evelyn. David just got into Hart Industries' security logs. Someone's been accessing Evelyn's schedule, communications, and location data for the past 6 weeks. The access codes trace back to someone inside the security team. The room went silent. Who? Evelyn asked. That's the problem. The logs show the access, but the identity is masked. It could be any of us. Marcus felt the familiar weight of betrayal settling over the room. Someone they'd trusted, someone they'd worked with, someone who was supposed to protect Evelyn had instead been selling her location and schedule to people who wanted her dead. We need to isolate everyone, Marcus said. Now. Until we figure out who... His phone rang. Nia's school. Marcus's blood went cold. This is Marcus Cole. Mr. Cole, this is Principal Williams. There's been a situation. Your daughter is fine, but we need you to come to the school immediately. What kind of situation? A man attempted to pick up Nia from her classroom during lunch period. He claimed to be her uncle. When the teacher questioned him because he wasn't on the approved list, he became aggressive. We've called the police, but I wanted you to know immediately. Marcus was already moving toward the door, checking his weapon, his mind racing through threat assessments and response protocols. Evelyn grabbed his arm. Marcus, it could be a trap. They could be using your daughter to draw you out. Then it's a trap I'm walking into, Marcus said, and his voice carried a coldness that made Michael step back. Because nobody threatens my daughter. Nobody. We'll come with you, Michael said. No, you stay here with Evelyn. This is what they want, to separate us, to make us predictable. I'm going alone, and I'm going fast, and if anyone tries to get between me and my daughter, they're going to learn exactly what I used to be before I became a server. He was out the door before either of them could argue. The subway was too slow. Marcus flagged a cab and paid the driver double to run lights and ignore speed limits. His mind was ice-cold clarity now, all the training and experience he'd buried coming roaring back to full awareness. They'd crossed a line. His daughter was off limits. His family was off limits. That had been the unspoken rule of his entire career. You could come after him, you could threaten him, but you didn't touch the people he loved. Someone had just broken that rule. And Marcus was going to make sure they understood the consequences. The school was on lockdown when he arrived. Police cars already present, officers taking statements. Principal Williams met him at the entrance, her face tight with controlled fear. Where is she? Marcus asked. My office. She's scared but unharmed. Mr. Cole, the man who tried to take her, he knew details. Her name, her classroom, your work schedule. This wasn't random. I know. Where's the man now? He fled when security arrived. The police are reviewing camera footage. Marcus followed her to the office where Nia sat in a chair far too big for her, her backpack clutched to her chest, her eyes red from crying. When she saw him, she launched herself across the room. Daddy! He caught her, held her, felt the trembling in her small body. Over her head, he met Principal Williams's eyes. I need those camera recordings, and I need them now. The police are following procedure. I'm following my daughter's safety. The recordings, please. Something in his voice, in his eyes, made her nod. She pulled up the security feed on her computer, and Marcus watched a man in his 30s, professional appearance, confident movements, approach Nia's classroom during lunch period. The man showed the teacher something, probably a fake ID, and reached for Nia. Marcus memorized every detail of the man's face. I'm going to need a copy of that footage, he said quietly. Mr. Cole, I have to give this to the police. And you will, after I get my copy. Principal Williams looked at him, seemed to make a decision, and sent the file to his phone. Marcus held Nia for another few minutes, then knelt down to her eye level. Baby, I need you to do something very brave for me. I need you to stay with Mrs. Chen for a few days. Not at home, somewhere else. Somewhere safe. Why? Because the people I'm helping, they're trying to use you to make me stop helping, and I can't let that happen, so I need you to be safe while I finish what I started. Are you going to hurt the man who tried to take me? Marcus thought about lying, decided she deserved the truth. If I have to keep you safe. Yes. She nodded, accepting this with the pragmatism of a child who'd already learned that the world wasn't always kind. Okay, Daddy, I'll be brave. You're already the bravest person I know. He called Mrs. Chen, explained the situation, arranged for her to take Nia to her son's house in New Jersey, somewhere completely disconnected from everything happening in Manhattan. Then he called Michael. They went after my daughter. She's safe. But Marcus Cole, the father, just died. What's coming next is what I used to be before I learned to be gentle. Tell Evelyn I'm done playing defense. We're going on the offensive, and we're not stopping until everyone involved in this is either in prison or in the ground. He hung up before Michael could respond. The man in the security footage had made a mistake. He'd gotten close enough for the cameras to capture his face clearly, which meant he could be identified, which meant he could be found. And once Marcus found him, he'd get answers, one way or another. Marcus returned to his apartment 2 hours later, carrying information that had cost him 3 favors from old contacts and one very uncomfortable conversation with a former intelligence analyst who still owed him for something that happened in a desert neither of them talked about anymore. The man who'd tried to take Nia had a name now, Derek Carlson, former private security, current freelance contractor with ties to a firm called Sentinel Solutions that specialized in what their website euphemistically called discrete problem resolution. Evelyn was sitting at his kitchen table with her laptop when he walked in, Michael positioned by the window with sightlines to the street. She looked up, saw something in Marcus's face that made her close the laptop. Did you find him? I found who he works for. David's running deeper background now, but we have enough to start tracking connections. Marcus set his phone on the table, pulled up the information his contact had sent. Sentinel Solutions has done contract work for 17 major corporations in the past 3 years. Guess how many of those corporations would be affected by your congressional testimony? All of them, Evelyn said quietly. 14. The other 3 are pharmaceutical and tech, completely different industries. But these 14, they're all manufacturing, all facing potential investigations for the same violations you're about to expose. And 6 months ago, they all retained the same law firm for regulatory defense. Michael moved closer to look at the data. That's not coincidence. That's coordination. That's conspiracy, Marcus corrected. They pooled resources, hired the same legal team, and when it became clear that legal defense wasn't going to be enough, they hired someone to eliminate the problem permanently. Evelyn stood, pacing the small kitchen with barely contained anger. They're trying to kill me to protect profit margins, to avoid accountability for exploiting workers and poisoning communities. People's lives mean so little to them that murder is just another business expense. Welcome to the world where everything has a price and some people can afford to pay it, Marcus said. The question is, how do we prove it? Because knowing and proving are different things, and we need evidence that will stand up in court. David's working on it, Michael said. He's tracing financial connections between Sentinel Solutions and the corporations. If we can show payment trails, communications, anything that directly links the attacks to corporate officers, we have a case. Marcus's phone buzzed. A text from David with an attachment. Marcus opened it and felt ice spread through his chest. We have a bigger problem. David just identified our mole. The room went silent. Marcus turned the phone so they could see the screen. Financial records showing regular deposits into an offshore account belonging to someone they'd all trusted. Someone who'd had access to every detail of Evelyn's security arrangements. Someone who'd been in position to facilitate every attack. No, Evelyn whispered. That's not possible. The name on the account was Sarah Chen. Michael's face went white. Sarah's been on my team for 4 years. She saved Ms. Hart's life twice. She wouldn't. Money changes people, Marcus said, his voice flat. Or maybe she was turned by something else. Blackmail, threats, leverage. Doesn't matter. What matters is she's been feeding information to whoever's trying to kill Evelyn, and she knows where we are right now. As if summoned by the words, Marcus's phone rang. Sarah. He answered on speaker, his voice neutral. Sarah. Marcus, we have a problem. I just picked up suspicious activity near your location. 2 vehicles, occupants unknown, circling the block. You might have been followed. Marcus met Evelyn's eyes across the table. Where are you right now? 3 blocks south, monitoring approach vectors like we discussed. Stay there. We're going to relocate. I'll call you with the new position in 20 minutes. Understood. Be careful. He hung up and immediately started moving, grabbing the tactical bag he'd prepared earlier, checking weapons, his mind already running through egress routes and defensive positions. She's giving us a 20-minute head start before she tells them we've moved, Marcus said, which means we have maybe 15 minutes before people with very bad intentions arrive at this building. We need to be gone in 10. Where do we go? Evelyn asked, already gathering her things. Somewhere Sarah doesn't know about. Somewhere no one knows about. Marcus pulled out a key from his pocket. I have a storage unit in Queens, registered under a name I haven't used in 6 years, paid annually in cash, completely off any grid. It's not comfortable, but it's secure. A storage unit, Evelyn repeated. You wanted to disappear. This is what disappearing actually looks like. Michael was already on his phone coordinating with David, establishing new communication protocols that didn't involve anyone on the current security team except themselves. James had been sent to a safe location earlier, but now even he couldn't be trusted. Anyone could be compromised. Anyone could have been bought or threatened or manipulated. They left through the building's back exit, moving through an alley that Marcus had scouted his first week living there. The route took them through 2 other buildings via connected basements, old architecture from when neighborhoods were designed for community rather than separation, and emerged 4 blocks from Marcus's apartment. A cab was waiting, arranged by David through a series of cutouts that made the trail impossible to follow. They drove to Queens in silence, Marcus watching for tails, Michael doing the same, both of them armed and ready for the attack that seemed inevitable. The storage facility was in an industrial area that had been dying slowly for 20 years. Chain-link fences, corrugated metal buildings, security that consisted of cameras that probably hadn't worked since the previous decade. Marcus had chosen it specifically because it was so unremarkable that no one would think to look there. Unit 247 was climate-controlled and large enough to hold furniture. Marcus had been using it to store things from his old life, military gear, documents, equipment he'd told himself he'd never need again. Now he was grateful for the paranoia that had made him keep it all. He unlocked the unit and ushered Evelyn and Michael inside. The space was larger than his apartment's living room, filled with plastic storage containers and a few pieces of furniture covered in drop cloths. Marcus pulled the chains on the overhead fluorescent lights, and the unit flooded with harsh white illumination. "This is where you've been hiding your past," Evelyn said, looking at the organized containers, each labeled with codes that probably meant something to Marcus. "This is where I stored it. There's a difference." He pulled out 3 containers, opened them to reveal supplies: food, water, medical equipment, clothing, cash, additional weapons. We can stay here for a few days if necessary. There's a bathroom 2 units down that I have access to. It's not the Ritz, but you won't die here. Unless Sarah figures out where we went, Michael said. She won't. This place exists in a gap in my official history. The name on the lease is someone I used to be before I was Marcus Cole. Someone who officially doesn't exist anymore. Evelyn sat on one of the covered furniture pieces. A couch, Marcus remembered, from his first apartment with his wife. So what now? We hide in a storage unit while they search for us? No. Now we go hunting. Marcus pulled out a laptop from one of the containers, powered it up, waited for it to connect to the mobile hotspot David had provided. We have names, we have corporations, we have a law firm coordinating their defense. What we don't have is the person at the center, the one who actually made the decision to kill you instead of just fighting you in court. How do we find that? We asked Sarah. Michael's head snapped around. You want to confront her? I want to use her. She thinks we don't know she's compromised, which means she's still reporting our movements, still coordinating with whoever hired Sentinel Solutions. We feed her false information, see where it goes, trace it back to the source. That's dangerous. If she realizes we know it, then we'll deal with it. But right now, she's our best connection to whoever's orchestrating this. We use that connection. Marcus composed a text message to Sarah, carefully worded to seem natural while providing specific tactical information. He told her they'd relocated to a safe house in the Bronx, gave her an address that was actually an abandoned warehouse David had identified, mentioned they'd be there for at least 48 hours while they waited for police to make progress on the investigation. Sarah's response came within minutes. Understood. We'll maintain surveillance perimeter. Stay safe. She's going to pass that location to them, Michael said. I'm counting on it. David's already setting up surveillance around the warehouse. When they show up to hit what they think is our location, we'll get facial recognition, vehicle identification, communication intercepts, everything we need to connect them back to whoever's paying the bills. The plan was solid, the kind of thing Marcus had done a dozen times in hostile territory when intelligence gathering mattered more than direct action. But Evelyn was looking at him with concern that had nothing to do with tactical considerations. You're setting a trap using yourself as bait, she said. I'm setting a trap using an empty building as bait. There's a difference. Is there? Because I've watched you for the past 3 days and I've seen you take risks that no security professional should take. You threw yourself over me during 2 separate explosions. You went alone to your daughter's school knowing it could be an ambush. You're acting like someone who doesn't care if he lives or dies, as long as the mission succeeds. Marcus met her eyes, and for a moment the mask he'd been wearing slipped. I care, but I also know what I'm good at, and what I'm good at requires putting myself between threats and the people I'm protecting. That's not suicidal. That's professional. It's both, she said quietly. And I need you to understand something, Marcus. I hired you to keep me alive, but not at the cost of your own life. Not at the cost of your daughter losing her father. If this plan puts you in danger, every plan puts someone in danger. At least this way I'm choosing where and when and how. That's more control than we've had since this started. Michael's phone buzzed. He answered, listened, his expression growing grim. That was David. The police just issued a statement about the Hart Industries attack. They're calling Thomas Morrison's death a suicide bombing by a disgruntled employee. No mention of coercion, no investigation into who might have threatened his daughter. The narrative is being controlled. By who? Evelyn asked. By people with enough influence to shape how law enforcement investigates attempted murder. Which means we're not just fighting hired contractors. We're fighting institutional corruption. Marcus had seen this before in places where power and money twisted reality until truth became whatever served the powerful. Then we don't rely on institutions. We gather evidence so overwhelming that it can't be ignored or suppressed, and we release it in a way that forces action. You're talking about going public, Evelyn said. I'm talking about making sure that if something happens to you, the people responsible don't get to write the story. We document everything. We create multiple backups. We establish dead man switches that automatically release information if certain conditions are met. That's paranoid. That's survival. Thomas Morrison's daughter was used to turn him into a weapon. Sarah was turned through methods we don't fully understand yet. Whoever's behind this has demonstrated they're willing to use any leverage necessary. We need to make ourselves too dangerous to kill because killing us triggers consequences worse than letting us live. They spent the next several hours setting up exactly that system. David provided technical expertise remotely, helping them create encrypted archives of all the evidence they'd gathered, establishing automated release protocols tied to their communications and vital signs, ensuring that if any of them disappeared or died, the information would go simultaneously to major news organizations, federal investigators, and congressional oversight committees. It was the kind of insurance policy that only worked if the people you were threatening believed you'd actually use it. But Marcus had learned a long time ago that the best weapons were the ones you never had to fire. His phone rang at 8:17, an unknown number. Marcus answered cautiously. "Mr. Cole." The voice was male, educated, carrying the particular confidence of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "My name is Jonathan Pritchard. I represent certain parties who have found themselves in unfortunate conflict with Ms. Hart. I'm calling to discuss a resolution." Marcus put the call on speaker. "I'm listening." "My clients are reasonable people who've been forced into unreasonable positions by Ms. Hart's inflexibility regarding certain regulatory matters. They bear her no personal ill will, but they cannot allow her congressional testimony to proceed as planned. It would be damaging to legitimate business interests and economically destabilizing to entire sectors. So they decided to kill her instead of just lobbying harder. They decided to explore all available options for protecting their interests. Unfortunately, several contracted parties have acted with excessive enthusiasm and insufficient discretion. My clients regret the collateral damage and the escalation of tensions." "Collateral damage? You mean the people who died?" "I mean the unfortunate consequences of what should have been a simple business negotiation. Which brings me to my purpose in calling. My clients are prepared to offer Ms. Hart a substantial settlement in exchange for her withdrawal from the congressional hearing and her commitment to refrain from further public statements regarding industry practices." Evelyn's face had gone rigid with controlled fury. She grabbed Marcus's phone. "This is Evelyn Hart. Tell your clients they can take their settlement and their threats and their hired killers and go straight to hell. I will testify. I will expose every illegal practice, every bribed official, every covered-up violation. And when I'm done, your clients will be explaining their business practices to federal prosecutors instead of their shareholders." There was a pause on the other end of the line. When Pritchard spoke again, his voice had lost its veneer of civility. "Ms. Hart, I strongly advise you to reconsider. My clients have been remarkably patient given the disruption you've caused to their operations. That patience has limits. So does mine, and you just reached them. Whatever happens next, remember that you had the chance to walk away." She hung up. The silence in the storage unit was heavy with the weight of a decision that couldn't be taken back. Michael looked like he wanted to argue, but knew it was pointless. Marcus simply nodded, understanding exactly what Evelyn had just done. She'd declared war. "They're going to escalate," Marcus said. "That call was their last attempt at a peaceful resolution. Now they'll commit fully to killing you, and they won't care about subtlety or collateral damage." "Good," Evelyn said, and there was steel in her voice that Marcus recognized from his own reflection after particularly difficult missions. "Let them come out of the shadows. Let them commit resources and show their faces. The more desperate they get, the more mistakes they'll make. Or the more dangerous they'll become." "I'm already living in a storage unit in Queens, Marcus. How much more dangerous can it get?" The answer came 3 hours later when David called with information that made Marcus's blood run cold. The warehouse they'd fed to Sarah as their location had just been hit by a 12-person tactical team using military-grade weapons and coordination that suggested professional special operations training. They'd breached the building, cleared it floor by floor, and disappeared when they confirmed it was empty. But they'd left behind something interesting: communications intercepts David had captured during the operation, orders being given by someone with tactical command experience, and a voice Marcus recognized. "Play that section again," Marcus said, listening to David's recording. The voice came through, slightly distorted by radio compression but unmistakable. "All teams report. Target location is negative. Repeat, negative on primary target. Expand search pattern and await further instructions." Marcus closed his eyes, placing the voice, connecting it to a face and a name from his past. That's James Reeves. He was in my unit, special forces, multiple deployments, one of the best tactical operators I ever worked with. Last I heard, he'd gone private sector after discharge. He's working for Sentinel Solutions, Michael said, checking the information David had sent. Listed as senior tactical consultant, which means you're not just up against hired contractors. You're up against someone who knows how you think, how you operate, how you fight. Yeah, Marcus said quietly. That's exactly what it means. Evelyn was watching him carefully. Is that going to be a problem? It's going to be a challenge. James is smart, experienced, and methodical. He doesn't make mistakes, and he doesn't give up once he's committed to an objective. If he's been tasked with killing you, he'll keep coming until either he succeeds or something stops him permanently. Can you stop him? Marcus thought about the man he'd served with, the soldier who'd saved his life twice and nearly died himself doing it. Thought about what it would mean to face someone like that across a conflict that only one of them could walk away from. I don't know, he admitted, but I'm going to have to try. The next morning brought news that changed everything. David called with an update that had Marcus, Evelyn, and Michael gathered around the laptop in tense silence. I've been following the money, David said through the encrypted connection, tracking payments from the 14 corporations to the law firm Pritchard works for, from the law firm to various shell companies, from the shell companies to Sentinel Solutions. The trail was deliberately obscured, but I found something interesting. One of the shell companies has a board member who also sits on Hart Industries' board. Who? Evelyn demanded. Patricia Hawthorne. The name landed like a physical blow. Patricia, who'd been pushing for Evelyn to step down temporarily. Patricia, who'd been in the boardroom during the drone attack and conveniently positioned away from the blast radius. Patricia, who had the access and the knowledge to coordinate every attack. She's been on my board for 8 years, Evelyn said, her voice hollow. I trusted her. She was a mentor when I first took over the company. She taught me half of what I know about navigating corporate politics. She also stands to gain substantially if you're removed, David continued. She has significant holdings in 3 of the 14 corporations facing investigation. Your testimony doesn't just threaten them. It threatens her personal wealth and her business relationships. She has both motive and means. But why? Evelyn asked. Why not just resign from my board and protect her interests from a distance? Why orchestrate murder? Because you know where all the bodies are buried, Marcus said. You've worked closely with her for 8 years. You probably have insights into her business practices, her connections, her methods. If she's been involved in the same violations you're about to expose, you're not just a threat to her investments. You're a threat to her freedom. If she goes down for more than just conspiracy to murder. She goes down for everything. Michael was already pulling up Patricia's complete background. She's connected to everyone, corporate boards, political committees, charitable foundations that probably serve as money laundering operations. If we take her down, we're taking down a network that spans multiple industries and reaches into government. Good, Evelyn said. Let's take it all down. We need proof, Marcus reminded her. David's financial tracking is solid, but a good lawyer will argue it's circumstantial. We need something direct. Communications, recordings, testimony from someone involved. We have Sarah, Michael said. If we can get her to flip to testify against Patricia and Sentinel Solutions in exchange for immunity, she won't flip, Marcus interrupted. She's been paid too well, or she's been threatened too effectively, or she's already in too deep. People like Sarah don't cooperate. They either run or they fight. So what do you suggest? Marcus thought about James Reeves, about Patricia Hawthorne, about all the people who'd decided that murder was an acceptable business strategy. Thought about his daughter safe in New Jersey, about Evelyn living in a storage unit, about Thomas Morrison dying in an elevator because his daughter had been threatened. I suggest we give them what they want, he said slowly, or at least make them think we're giving them what they want. He outlined the plan, and with each detail, he saw understanding dawn on Evelyn's and Michael's faces. It was risky, aggressive, and required perfect timing. It was also exactly the kind of operation Marcus had been trained to execute. This could get you killed, Evelyn said when he'd finished. Everything we've done could get me killed. At least this way we're controlling the variables. And if it works? If it works, we get Patricia's confession on record, we get evidence of the conspiracy that can't be disputed, and we end this. You testify at the congressional hearing, the investigations proceed, and everyone involved faces justice. And if it doesn't work? Marcus met her eyes. Then you testify anyway, and the dead man switch David set up makes sure the truth comes out, even if I'm not around to see it. Evelyn stood, crossed the storage unit to stand in front of Marcus. She was close enough that he could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the weight of everything she'd been carrying, the fear she refused to show. I don't want you to die for me, she said quietly. I'm not dying for you. I'm living for my daughter. But to make sure she has a future worth living in, I need to make sure people like Patricia Hawthorne don't get to escape consequences just because they're rich enough to hire killers. That's not your responsibility. Maybe not, but it's what I'm good at, and I'm tired of being good at violence without using it for something that matters. She reached up and touched the bruise on his jaw, the one that had mostly faded but still showed evidence of the fight at Novaro. You're a good man, Marcus Cole. Better than you think you are. I'm a man who's very good at hurting people when necessary. That doesn't make me good, it just makes me useful. You're wrong, she said, but I don't think I can convince you of that. Michael cleared his throat. When do we execute this plan? Marcus checked his watch. Tomorrow. That gives us 24 hours to set everything up, to position all the pieces, to make sure that when it goes down, we're ready for every contingency. And Sarah? We feed her the information tonight. Tell her we're moving to a new location tomorrow afternoon. Give her the time and place. She'll pass it to Patricia. Patricia will coordinate with James Reeves and Sentinel Solutions, and they'll plan their final assault. Only we'll be waiting for them, Evelyn said. Only we'll be waiting for them, Marcus confirmed. They spent the rest of the day preparing. David provided technical support, establishing surveillance and recording equipment at the location Marcus had chosen, an abandoned office building in Lower Manhattan that had once housed a financial services company before the 2008 crash. It had been sitting empty for years, owned by a bank that couldn't sell it and couldn't afford to maintain it. Perfect for what they needed. Marcus walked the building 3 times, mapping every room, every exit, every potential position. He placed equipment, established firing lanes, created escape routes. Michael coordinated with David on electronic surveillance, ensuring that every word spoken in the building would be captured and transmitted to secure servers. Evelyn watched Marcus work, seeing the transformation from the gentle single father she'd come to know into something harder, colder, more dangerous. This was who he'd been before, the operator who'd been pulled in for impossible missions because he could do what needed doing without hesitation. Does it scare you? She asked him during a break. Becoming this again? Yes, he said honestly, because I know how easy it would be to stay this way. How easy it would be to forget that I'm supposed to be someone else now, someone better. The violence is comfortable. It's what I'm good at, and that terrifies me more than anything Patricia or James could do. You won't forget, Evelyn said. You have Nia. She'll always bring you back. I hope you're right. That night, Marcus sent the message to Sarah. A new safe house, specific address, specific time. They'd be there tomorrow at 4 p.m., waiting for additional security resources to arrive before relocating again. It was a plausible story, detailed enough to be believable, vague enough to seem like legitimate operational security. Sarah responded within minutes, acknowledging the information and confirming she'd maintained surveillance protocols. It's done, Marcus said. Now we wait. They spent the night in the storage unit, 3 people bound together by circumstance and something deeper, a growing understanding that some fights mattered more than others, that some stands had to be taken regardless of cost. Evelyn fell asleep on the old couch around midnight. Michael took the first watch, sitting by the unit's door with his weapon ready. Marcus sat at the laptop, reviewing the building schematics one more time, running through scenarios, calculating probabilities. His phone buzzed, a text from Mrs. Chen. Your daughter asks about you every hour. She's being brave, but she's scared. Whatever you're doing, finish it soon and come home. Marcus typed back, tomorrow. I'll finish it tomorrow. Tell her I love her. I will. And Marcus? Come home alive. She needs her father more than the world needs another dead hero. He set down the phone and stared at the concrete walls of the storage unit, thinking about the man he'd been, the man he'd tried to become, and the man he needed to be tomorrow. Somewhere in Manhattan, Patricia Hawthorne was probably sleeping in luxury, confident that her hired killers would solve her problem within 24 hours. James Reeves was probably planning the assault, bringing all his training and experience to bear on eliminating a target he didn't know was someone who'd once saved his life. And Sarah Chen was probably wrestling with whatever guilt or fear or greed had turned her into a traitor, knowing that she'd set in motion events that would end with people dying. Tomorrow would bring violence. Tomorrow would bring revelation. Tomorrow would determine whether justice meant anything when the people who'd violated it had enough money to try buying their way out of consequences. Marcus checked his weapon one more time, then set it aside and tried to sleep. He dreamed of his wife, of Naya, of the life he'd built from the pieces of who he'd been. And he woke at dawn, ready to fight for the chance to keep that life. The abandoned office building stood like a monument to corporate failure in lower Manhattan, its windows dark and empty, its lobby filled with the particular silence of spaces where human activity had ceased, but the architecture remained. Marcus arrived at noon, 4 hours before the scheduled meeting time, giving himself room to prepare for what was coming. Michael was already there, having entered through a service entrance on the north side. David had remotely disabled what little security remained, cameras that no longer recorded, alarms that no longer functioned. The building was a ghost, which made it perfect for what they needed. "Top 3 floors are clear," Michael reported. "I've placed audio and video equipment in the locations you specified. Everything's transmitting to David's servers with redundant backups. Whatever happens here today, we'll have a record." "Good. Evelyn?" "Secure location with David. She wanted to be here, but she's the asset we're protecting, not a participant in tactical operations," Marcus finished. She understood that, even if she didn't like it. He'd had that conversation with Evelyn at dawn, watching her argue, and then reluctantly accept that her presence would compromise the operation. She was too valuable, too visible, too much of what they were trying to protect. This final confrontation needed to happen without her in the line of fire. Marcus moved through the building, checking each position, each sight line, each element of the trap they'd constructed. The 15th floor was where it would happen, a large open space that had once been a trading floor, now empty except for the support columns and the ghosts of cubicles marked by discolored carpet. Good visibility, multiple approach vectors, enough space to maneuver but not so much that control became impossible. He'd positioned equipment in the corners, cameras, microphones, even infrared sensors that would track movement. Everything fed to David's monitoring station where he could watch in real time and preserve evidence of whatever transpired. At 2 p.m., Marcus's phone rang. "Sarah." "Just confirming you're still planning to be at the new location at 4, she said, her voice carrying the same professional tone she'd always used. No hint of betrayal, no indication she was anything other than a dedicated security professional doing her job. "Confirmed," Marcus said. "Michael and I will arrive at 3:45 to sweep the location before Ms. Hart's arrival at 4:15. "Understood. I'll maintain position at the perimeter." "Sarah," Marcus said, choosing his words carefully, "when this is over, whatever happens, I want you to know that I understand. People make choices for reasons that seem necessary at the time. Sometimes those reasons are good enough. Sometimes they're not." There was a pause. "I don't know what you mean." "I think you do, but we'll talk about it later." He hung up before she could respond. Michael was watching him from across the empty trading floor. "You think she'll run?" "No, she's committed now, too deep to back out. She'll see it through to whatever end comes." "You sound like you feel sorry for her." "I feel sorry for everyone involved in this. Patricia, James, Sarah, they all made choices that seemed rational in the moment. Protect your investments, take a lucrative contract, accept payment for information that seemed harmless, and now they're all standing at the edge of consequences they probably never fully imagined." That's very philosophical for someone about to potentially kill his former unit member. Marcus checked his weapon, verified the ammunition, tested the weight and balance. Philosophy is what keeps you human when you're doing inhuman things. I learned that the hard way. At 3:15, Marcus received a text from David. Thermal imaging shows 8 individuals approaching from the south, 4 from the east. Professional spacing, tactical formation. They're early. Of course they were early. James Reeves would never walk into a location at the expected time. He'd arrive ahead of schedule, establish positions, prepare the ambush for when his targets appeared. Marcus smiled grimly. He'd taught James that technique. "They're here," he told Michael. 12 operators split into 2 teams. James is running the same playbook we used in Kandahar. Early insertion, position establishment, wait for the target to enter the kill zone. Except we're already in position. They moved to their prepared locations. Marcus positioned himself behind a support column with sight lines to 3 of the 4 entrances. Michael took a position that covered the remaining entrance and provided overlapping fields of fire. They weren't trying to win a firefight against 12 professional operators. They were trying to create a situation where violence became unnecessary. The first team entered through the south entrance at 3:27, moving with the practiced efficiency of people who'd done this 1,000 times. Marcus recognized the movement patterns, James's training, his methods, his particular approach to room clearing. He waited. The team swept the floor, finding it empty, and took positions covering the entrances. The second team entered from the east, completed their own sweep, established their positions. 12 armed professionals, all waiting for 2 targets to walk into a trap. At 3:40, Marcus keyed his radio, a frequency he knew James would be monitoring. "Hello, James." The response came immediately, James's voice carrying surprise but not panic. "Marcus? Marcus Cole? It's been a long time. What the hell are you doing here?" "Protecting someone you've been hired to kill. Small world." There was a pause as James processed this information, calculated new variables, adapted to changing circumstances. "You're working for Hart?" "I'm working for someone who deserves to live more than your clients deserve to profit from her death." "This is a contract, Marcus. Professional obligation. Nothing personal." "It became personal when your people tried to kidnap my 8-year-old daughter. You know me, James. You know what I'm capable of when someone threatens my family. Walk away now and we can both pretend this never happened." "You know I can't do that." "I know. But I had to offer." Marcus stepped out from behind his cover, hands visible but positioned near his weapon. 12 guns immediately tracked to him, 12 professionals ready to fire on command. But James raised a hand, stopping them. He emerged from his own position, and Marcus saw the years that had passed since they'd last served together. James looked older, harder, carrying the weight of whatever he'd done in the years since leaving the service. But his eyes were the same, sharp, intelligent, calculating. "You're outnumbered 12-2, James said. "Even with your skills, those aren't odds you can overcome." "I'm not trying to overcome them. I'm trying to give you information that might change your mind about this contract." "I'm listening," Marcus gestured to the air around them. "Everything that's said in this building is being recorded. Video, audio, transmitted in real time to secure servers with automated backups. Your client, Patricia Hawthorne, doesn't know that. When she arrives, and she will arrive because she needs to confirm Evelyn Hart's death personally, she's going to say things that prove conspiracy to commit murder, things that will destroy her and everyone associated with her." Patricia Hawthorne isn't coming here. This is a tactical operation, not a board meeting. She's coming because I told Sarah to tell her that Evelyn Hart would be here, vulnerable, with minimal security. Patricia won't be able to resist seeing it happen. She's invested too much, risked too much to delegate the final act. She'll want to witness it. James considered this. "You're running a counter-operation, using us to draw out your actual target. Smart as ever. The question is, what do you do with that information? You can complete your contract, kill me and Michael, and wait for Evelyn Hart to arrive. But when Patricia shows up and incriminates herself on recordings that are already in federal custody, you become an accessory to conspiracy. Or you can walk away now, void the contract, and avoid spending the next 20 years in a federal prison." "You always did have a gift for persuasion. I learned from the best." The radio crackled, David's voice, urgent. "Marcus, we have a vehicle approaching, single occupant, matches Patricia Hawthorne's description." James heard it too. Their communications were on the same frequency. He looked at Marcus with something that might have been respect or might have been resignation. "She's really coming. I told you she would. She needs control, needs to see it happen, needs to confirm that the threat to her empire is eliminated. And you're going to let her walk into a recorded confession. I'm going to give her enough rope to hang herself and everyone who hired you. The question is whether you want to be part of that hanging." James was silent for a long moment, weighing professional obligation against personal survival, loyalty against pragmatism. Finally, he keyed his radio. "All teams, stand down. Weapons safe. Prepare to evacuate." "Sir?" one of his operators questioned. "We've been compromised. This operation is terminated. Move out." Standard dispersal protocol. The 12 operators began withdrawing, professional to the end, their movements coordinated and efficient. But James remained, his weapon lowered but not holstered. "You're letting them go?" Michael asked from his position. "They're soldiers following orders," Marcus said. "The person giving the orders is who we want." Patricia Hawthorne entered the building 7 minutes later, escorted by 2 private security guards who clearly weren't military trained. She was dressed in an expensive suit, her silver hair perfect, her demeanor calm and controlled. She walked onto the 15th floor expecting to see a body, expecting to see confirmation that her problem had been solved. Instead, she saw Marcus and Michael, very much alive, very much armed. She stopped, her expression cycling through surprise, calculation, and then settling on cold assessment. "Mr. Cole, I should have known you'd be more difficult to eliminate than the others anticipated." "You should have known a lot of things, Ms. Hawthorne, like the fact that murder tends to have consequences even for people rich enough to think they're above them." "I don't know what you're talking about." Marcus smiled. "This building is wired for sound and video. Everything you say is being recorded and transmitted to federal servers. You might want to keep that in mind before you decide whether to keep lying." Her face went pale, then flushed with anger. "You can't. That's illegal surveillance. It's surveillance of a private property that I have permission to access. Anything you say here is admissible. So please continue explaining how you don't know anything about the multiple attempts to murder Evelyn Hart." Patricia's security guards were looking uncomfortable, clearly not prepared for this situation. She dismissed them with a gesture, and they retreated toward the elevators, abandoning her with the instinct of people who recognized a sinking ship. Alone now, Patricia's mask of control slipped further. "You have no idea what you're interfering with. The industries that would be destroyed by Evelyn's testimony, the jobs lost, the economic damage. You mean the illegal profits that would stop flowing, the exploitation that would be exposed, the executives who'd face criminal charges for violations they've been covering up for years. It's not that simple. The system is more complex than you understand. Actually, it's very simple. You and your associates decided that murder was cheaper than accountability. You hired professionals to kill someone whose only crime was planning to tell the truth. And when those professionals failed, you escalated, getting sloppier, more desperate, until you made enough mistakes that we could trace everything back to you." Patricia straightened, trying to recover her composure. "Even if you have recordings, they won't hold up in court. I have the best lawyers money can buy. I have connections throughout the justice system. You're a former soldier working security. Who do you think will be believed? The evidence will be believed. The financial records showing payment from you to Sentinel Solutions. The communications between you and Sarah Chen coordinating Evelyn's movements. The testimony from Thomas Morrison's daughter about how her father was coerced. And your own words, recorded in this building, admitting to knowledge of the conspiracy." "I admitted nothing." "You admitted enough. But if you want to make it clearer for the federal prosecutors who are receiving this transmission right now, please keep talking." The color drained from Patricia's face as the full reality of her situation became clear. She'd walked into a trap, said enough to establish knowledge and intent, and was now standing in a room where every word she spoke was being documented and transmitted to authorities she couldn't bribe or intimidate. "What do you want?" she asked finally, her voice small and defeated. "I want you to answer one question honestly. Why? You had wealth, respect, influence. Why risk it all to kill someone who was just doing what she thought was right?" Patricia laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Because people like Evelyn Hart don't understand how the world actually works. She thinks truth matters more than stability. She thinks individual conscience matters more than systemic necessity. She was going to destroy industries that employ millions of people, collapse supply chains that support entire economies, trigger investigations that would destabilize markets worldwide. One woman's moral certainty against the functioning of civilization itself. So you decided that civilization required her death. I decided that civilization required her silence, The death was just the most permanent form of silence available. Marcus glanced in the camera in the corner, knowing that every word was being preserved, knowing that Patricia had just given prosecutors exactly what they needed. "Thank you for your honesty," he said. "It's going to make the trial very straightforward." Patricia seemed to crumple then, the weight of consequences finally overwhelming the confidence that had carried her through decades of corporate warfare. She sat down on the dusty floor, her expensive suit touching concrete that probably hadn't been cleaned in years. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now the federal agents who've been monitoring this transmission arrive and place you under arrest. You'll be charged with conspiracy to commit murder, multiple counts of attempted murder, witness intimidation, and probably a dozen other charges that prosecutors will add once they review all the evidence. You'll spend the rest of your life in prison, and the industries you are trying to protect will be investigated and reformed anyway. Evelyn will testify, the truth will come out, and everything you did will have been for nothing." "Not for nothing," Patricia said quietly. "I protected them for as long as I could. That's what leaders do. They make the hard choices so others don't have to." Leaders make choices that protect their people. You made choices that protected profit margins. There's a difference. The sound of approaching sirens filled the building. Marcus had coordinated with Detective Chen earlier, providing her with the location and timing, ensuring that law enforcement would be ready to take Patricia into custody the moment she incriminated herself. Federal agents entered the building along with NYPD officers, moving with the cautious efficiency of people who'd been briefed on the situation. Detective Chen was among them, her expression grim but satisfied. "Ms. Hawthorne," she said, producing handcuffs. "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder. You have the right to remain silent." Patricia didn't resist as she was cuffed and read her rights. She looked at Marcus as they led her toward the elevators. "You were just a server," she said, confused. "How did a server destroy everything I built?" "I wasn't just a server," Marcus replied. "I was someone who learned that protecting people matters more than protecting systems. You forgot that. Or maybe you never knew it in the first place." They took her away, and the building emptied of federal agents and police officers, leaving Marcus and Michael alone in the vast empty space of the 15th floor. "It's over," Michael said, the tension finally draining from his voice. "This part is over. There's still testimony to give, trials to attend, probably months of legal proceedings, but the immediate threat is done." Marcus's phone rang. "Evelyn." "I watched the whole thing," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "David streamed it to me. You did it. You actually did it." "We did it. All of us." "When can I come home?" "Give it 24 hours for the arrests to process. FBI is picking up the Sentinel Solutions operators now, and they're issuing warrants for everyone connected to the conspiracy. By tomorrow, you should be able to return to your life." "My life? I'm not sure I remember what that looks like anymore." "You'll figure it out. And this time, maybe you can live it without people trying to kill you. That would be a nice change." Marcus ended the call and stood in the empty building, feeling the adrenaline ebb, feeling the weight of the past days settle onto his shoulders. He'd done what needed doing. The threat was eliminated, the conspiracy exposed, justice in motion. Now he needed to go home. Mrs. Chen called him that evening with the information that Nia was ready to return from New Jersey. Marcus took the train out to pick her up, his ribs still aching, but his heart lighter than it had been in days. Nia launched herself into his arms the moment she saw him, and Marcus held her tight, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, feeling the solid reality of her small body against his chest. "I was so brave, Daddy," she said into his shoulder. "I didn't cry even once." "You were incredibly brave. I'm so proud of you." "Is the bad stuff over now?" "Yes, baby. The bad stuff is over." They returned to Brooklyn together, and Marcus spent that evening doing the most normal things he could think of, making dinner, helping with homework, reading stories before bed, reclaiming the rhythms of the life he'd built, the life he'd fought to protect. 3 days later, Evelyn Hart testified before the Congressional Committee. Marcus watched from the public gallery, positioned where he could monitor the room but far enough back to remain unnoticed. Michael and a new security team, thoroughly vetted, carefully selected, maintained discreet positions around the chamber. Evelyn spoke for 4 hours, detailing the violations she'd uncovered, the conspiracy to silence her, the murder attempts and corporate corruption that had been exposed. Her testimony was clear, comprehensive, and damning. By the time she finished, 12 corporations were facing federal investigations, and 17 executives had been placed on administrative leave pending criminal charges. Patricia Hawthorne's arrest had broken open the conspiracy, leading to arrests of Sentinel Solutions leadership, the law firm partners who'd coordinated the attacks, and several corporate officers who'd approved the contracts. Sarah Chen had been arrested attempting to flee the country and was cooperating with prosecutors in exchange for a reduced sentence. James Reeves had disappeared, voiding his contract and vanishing into whatever networks existed for former special operations soldiers who wanted to leave their past behind. Marcus suspected he'd resurface eventually under a different name, doing different work, trying to leave behind the choices that had led him to this point. The day after Evelyn's testimony, she invited Marcus to her office at Hart Industries. The building had been repaired, the damaged boardroom rebuilt, security upgraded to levels that would make penetration nearly impossible. She was sitting at her desk when he arrived, looking more relaxed than he'd ever seen her. The constant tension that had defined her during the crisis had eased, replaced by something that looked almost like peace. "Thank you for coming," she said. "I wanted to talk to you about your future with Hart Industries. I told you from the beginning, when this was over, I was done." "I know, but I'm hoping you'll reconsider. I'm restructuring security completely, bringing in new leadership, new protocols. I'd like you to head the department. Executive-level position, substantial salary, resources to build the kind of security operation that prevents what happened from ever happening again." Marcus had expected this offer, had prepared his answer. "I appreciate it, Evelyn, truly, but that's not the life I want. I'm a father first, and that job would require me to be something else, something I worked very hard to stop being. I understand, but I had to ask. There is something I'd like, though." "Name it." "Thomas Morrison's daughter. She's probably traumatized, probably facing years of therapy and recovery from what they put her through. I'd like Hart Industries to establish a fund for her education, her medical care, whatever she needs, and for the families of anyone else who was hurt or killed because of this conspiracy. Make it right in whatever way you can." Evelyn nodded slowly. "Consider it done. The Morrison Memorial Fund. We'll announce it next week." "Thank you." She stood, came around the desk, and extended her hand. "You saved my life, Marcus, multiple times. I won't forget that." He shook her hand. "You gave me purpose when I needed it. Made me remember that protection means something. We're even. We're not even. But I accept that you need to believe that." Marcus left Hart Industries for the last time, taking the elevator down to the street level, emerging into the Manhattan afternoon. He walked to the subway, rode it back to Brooklyn, picked up Nia from school, and went home to his apartment where dinner needed to be made, and homework needed to be checked, and stories needed to be read. This was his life. This was what mattered. 6 months later, Marcus received an invitation to a small private event at a botanical garden in upstate New York. The card was simple, elegant, with just a date and time and a handwritten note from Evelyn. "I'm trying something new, something that isn't work or crisis or fighting for survival. I'd like you to be there." He almost didn't go. The crisis was over. The connection should be over. Returning to separate lives was healthiest for everyone involved. But something in the handwritten note and the vulnerability of reaching out made him reconsider. He brought Nia with him because she'd asked questions about the woman her daddy had protected, and because Marcus thought maybe it was time for the different parts of his life to meet. The botanical garden was beautiful in early autumn, leaves turning gold and crimson, air crisp with the promise of change. A small gathering of people Marcus didn't recognize stood near a gazebo decorated with simple flowers. Evelyn saw them arrive and broke away from the group, her face lighting up in a way Marcus had never seen during their time together during the crisis. "You came," she said. "You invited us." She knelt down to Nia's level. "You must be Nia. Your father talks about you all the time." "He talks about you too," Nia said with the brutal honesty of 8-year-olds. "He says you're very brave and very stubborn." Evelyn laughed, genuine and delighted. "He's absolutely right on both counts." Over the next hour, Marcus learned that Evelyn had stepped back from day-to-day operations at Hart Industries, appointing a new CEO, while she remained as board chair. She'd started a foundation focused on corporate accountability and worker protection. She was teaching business ethics at Columbia. She was building a life that included more than just work. "I'm learning to be a person again," she told Marcus, while Nia explored the gardens with some of the other guests' children. Not just a CEO or a target or a testimony, just Evelyn, trying to figure out what that means. "How's it going?" "Slowly, but better than I expected." They walked through the gardens together, two people who'd survived something extraordinary and were trying to find their way back to ordinary. "Do you ever miss it?" Evelyn asked. "The intensity, the purpose, the feeling of doing something that mattered." "Every day," Marcus admitted. "But then I watch Nia learn about coral reefs or help her with math homework, or listen to her talk about her day, and I remember that this matters too. Maybe more. Definitely differently. You're a good father." "I'm trying to be. That's all any of us can do. Try to be better than we were." As the sun set over the gardens, casting everything in golden light, Marcus realized that the crisis had changed both of them. Evelyn had learned that power without connection was hollow. Marcus had learned that protecting people didn't always require violence. Sometimes it just required showing up, being present, choosing connection over isolation. They stayed in touch after that, occasional messages checking in, updates on Nia's school achievements, and Evelyn's foundation work. A friendship built on shared trauma, but growing into something healthier, something that didn't require crisis to sustain it. 2 years after the congressional testimony, Marcus attended the sentencing hearing for Patricia Hawthorne. She received 35 years for conspiracy to commit murder, with additional sentences for other charges running concurrently. The judge's statement emphasized that wealth and position did not place anyone above the law, that corporations were subject to the same accountability as individuals. Evelyn sat beside Marcus in the courtroom, watching justice finally arrive. "Thank you," she said quietly as Patricia was led away. "For what?" "For believing that this mattered, that exposing the truth was worth the risk. I couldn't have done it without you." "You could have," Marcus said, "but I'm glad you didn't have to." That evening, Marcus returned to his apartment in Brooklyn where Nia was waiting with a new book about deep-sea ecosystems and a million questions about bioluminescence. He made dinner while she read aloud, her voice filling the small kitchen with wonder at the strange creatures living in darkness and creating their own light. This was victory, Marcus thought. Not the arrests or the testimony or the justice system finally working the way it should. Victory was this moment, this ordinary evening, this chance to be a father to a daughter who would grow up knowing that her dad had been brave when it mattered and gentle when that mattered more. 5 years after the crisis, Marcus received an invitation to Evelyn's wedding. She'd met someone through her foundation work, a civil rights attorney who shared her passion for accountability and justice. The ceremony was small, intimate, held in the same botanical garden where Marcus had first seen her building a life beyond survival. Nia attended with him, 13 now, and already showing signs of the intelligent, compassionate woman she'd become. She'd maintained a friendship with Evelyn over the years, occasional visits and conversations that had nothing to do with the crisis that had brought them together. During the reception, Evelyn pulled Marcus aside. "I wanted to tell you something," she said. "I'm happy, genuinely, completely happy, and I don't think I would have gotten here if you hadn't protected me long enough for me to figure out what I was protecting my life for. Thank you for that. You did the hard part. I just kept you alive long enough to do it. You did more than that. You showed me that strength isn't just about never breaking. Sometimes it's about breaking and choosing to rebuild into something better." Marcus watched her return to her new husband, saw the joy in her face, the lightness that came from leaving survival mode and learning to actually live. That night, walking home with Nia through Brooklyn's quiet streets, his daughter asked him a question. "Daddy, do you think you'll ever do something like that again? Protect someone who needs protecting?" Marcus thought about it carefully. "I don't know, baby. I hope I never have to. But I also know that if someone needs help, if someone's in danger, and I'm in a position to make a difference, I probably won't be able to walk away. That's just who I am." "I think that's a good thing to be," Nia said. "Someone who helps when it matters. As long as I remember to come home to you." "You always do, Daddy. You always do." 10 years after the crisis, Marcus Cole stood in a high school auditorium watching his daughter receive her diploma, valedictorian of her class, already accepted to 3 prestigious marine biology programs with full scholarships. She'd grown up strong and compassionate, intelligent and brave, the best parts of both her parents combined into someone entirely her own. After the ceremony, as families celebrated and students made plans for the future, Nia found Marcus in the crowd. Mom would be proud, she said, and there were tears in her eyes, but also joy, the bittersweet acknowledgement of loss mixed with appreciation for the life that continued. She would be incredibly proud. I know I am. You did good, Dad. Raising me alone, keeping me safe, teaching me that being strong doesn't mean you can't be kind. You did really good. Marcus pulled her into a hug, this young woman who'd been a little girl when violence came through a restaurant door and changed everything. She'd survived her father's transformation back into a protector, survived the fear and uncertainty, and emerged into someone remarkable. I had good material to work with, he said. That evening, Marcus received a message from Evelyn. She'd heard about Nia's graduation through the network of connection they'd maintained over the years. She wanted to contribute to Nia's college fund, wanted to celebrate this milestone, wanted to remain part of the strange extended family they'd accidentally created during a crisis a decade ago. Marcus accepted because he'd learned that accepting help wasn't weakness, that connections formed in darkness could grow into light, that the people who stood beside you during the worst moments of your life sometimes became the people who celebrated the best moments too. He sat on his apartment's fire escape that night, looking out over Brooklyn, thinking about the journey from that first night at Luminaire when 3 men had tried to kill someone and Marcus Cole had remembered who he used to be. He'd been terrified of becoming that person again, afraid that violence would consume the gentle life he'd built. But what he'd learned was more nuanced. He could be both. Could be the father who made pancakes and checked homework, and could be the protector who stood between threats and the people who needed protection. The two identities weren't contradictory. They were complementary. His phone rang. Unknown number. Marcus considered not answering, but old instincts made him pick up. Mr. Cole? The voice was young, female, frightened. My name is Rebecca Morrison. Thomas Morrison was my father. I'm sorry to bother you, but I found your number in some files my father kept, and I'm in trouble, bad trouble. People are threatening me because of what my father knew, and I don't know who else to call. Marcus closed his eyes, feeling the familiar weight settling onto his shoulders. The weight of capability, of responsibility, of being someone who could help when help was desperately needed. Tell me where you are, he said. I'm on my way. Because some things didn't change. Some parts of who you were remained constant regardless of how much time passed or how much you wanted to leave violence behind. Marcus Cole was a father first, but he was also a protector. And when someone needed protecting, he answered. That was who he'd always been. That was who he'd always be. And as he grabbed his jacket and headed out into the Brooklyn night, he thought about Nia sleeping safely in her room, about Evelyn living her happy life, about all the people he'd protected, and all the people still out there who might need protecting someday. The world was full of threats, but it was also full of protectors. And Marcus Cole had learned that the greatest victory wasn't defeating every enemy or preventing every crisis. It was choosing, every single day, to use strength in service of something worth protecting. His daughter, his friends, the people who couldn't protect themselves. That was enough. That was everything. And as he disappeared into the city's darkness to help someone who needed help, Marcus smiled. Because this, the choice to stand between violence and innocence, to use hard-won skills for purposes that mattered, to be gentle when possible and fierce when necessary, this was what it meant to be fully human. Not just one thing or another, but all of it, balanced and intentional and chosen. The protector's choice, made every day, for as long as it mattered, for as long as he could.